I'll give you a correct address. Like a little fire, a one-story, thinking about 40 miles. Over to 273-273. Over to 273-273.
Good afternoon to this edition of Taking It to the Streets. I'm your host, Chris Naum. I'm joined with my esteemed colleague, Doug Klein here, and we're live from FDIC in downtown Indianapolis. So how's it going, Doug, so far?
Man, I'll tell you what, FDIC, there's nothing like it. And every year you come here and it's like the build up, you're exhausted by the time you get here building up to it. And as soon as you get here, it's like somebody plugs in the battery pack. Your charging system goes on full mode to get charged. And right now I'm so excited. I don't know whether to go crazy, blind, whatever. We both just finished 2 great programs. We were side by side basically on there. And I sat down just a few minutes ago with the 8 Attitudes of Servant Leadership at the Fire Engineering Pinwheel booth to sign some DVDs and you know, talk to some good folks. And man, what a great show we're at.
Yeah,
absolutely. This is awesome.
Well, this is a great opportunity for us to be live with our audiences and obviously to talk about a few things within the brief time frame of our program. Again, being live is a phenomenal opportunity. We're going to talk a little bit about our programs, some of the other opportunities here at FDIC. We hope to have a few other colleagues popping in here as we hope for a live session. I do want to make mention of a couple of key items here. 3M Fire and Safety is our proud sponsor for Fire Engineering's most trusted voices radio show live here from FDIC 2018, which is phenomenal. We certainly want to thank 3M Scott Fire and Safety for that opportunity. They are a global leader in high-performance respiratory products and other protective solutions for the fire, petroleum, chemical, industrial, and emergency services industries. And again, they have a phenomenal lineup here, just to let everybody know with some of the activities. They are, again, once again, the official provider of self-contained breathing apparatus for the hands-on training evolutions at FDIC. The HOT programs covers the latest technology and techniques from leading industrial experts. So just phenomenal HOT programs. And again, there's a wide variety of different activities that they're sponsoring going forward here with the 3M Safety Roadshow that some of our other colleagues will be talking about over the course of the day. But again, today they're doing part of their HOT activities, which are just finishing up. I know that the afternoon sessions have started up here this afternoon. They finished up the morning session, and this is day 2 of the HOT program. So again, our thanks to 3M Scott Fire and Safety for this opportunity. So Doug just mentioned, we just came off of our morning sessions, both of us, as well as a couple of our other colleagues, Tiger Schmittendorf, Billy Greenwood, along with a couple of other colleagues. Everybody, unfortunately, due to the boss, Bobby Halton, unfortunately scheduled everybody at the same time. So we were all, unfortunately, doing our programs from 8 o'clock till noon here this morning with a phenomenal opportunity. I did my program on the Fire Officer's Guide to Today's Buildings on Fire. Had a phenomenal participation level of individuals throughout the United States as students. And we just had a great conversation and dialogue talking about today's challenges of building construction, fire ground operations, integrating some lessons learned from the fire ground, some information on fire dynamics, and more importantly, providing a model approach that you and I have talked quite a bit about. Absolutely. In terms of fire ground operations, buildings on fire, and the Building Facts program, which is the building construction and first due operations dealing with construction, tactics, and safety. So Doug and I have had the opportunity to talk on a couple of our other podcast programs for our radio program, on both of our series, talking about how that is so integral to our operations in today's demanding fire ground. And then you had the opportunity to talk about leadership on the other side of the fence, dealing with that aspect of today also, right?
Yeah, we did professional development, developing the next generation of fire service leaders. And I had a phenomenal group in there, and the conversations and dialogue that were going on with this group of people. And when I say I had a great group of people, we were very diverse. Geographically, we were diverse. Age range, we were diverse. We had Virgin Islands that were in there. We were international, interdiversity, males and females. And let me tell you, the range that was in there, I had a lot of great conversations about the fact that we don't have professional development programs out there that you and I grew up in. And that's, something we've talked about significantly, but just to see that there's not a lot of models out there and that there's some challenges people are having in developing our next generation of leaders. And one of the things a guy threw out to me was, I have no bench. And that means he has no depth in what he's pulling from. And we had departments, we had Houston Fire Department in there, which is over, I think they got like 105 stations across 4 shifts, and down to a single small one department. And they're all working for the same common goal of putting together a program where we can develop people. And I would be remiss if I didn't. Everybody thinks about professional development as taking you through the ranks of the fire service, which it is, but also professional development is more. It's developing people and developing leaders, and leadership has nothing to do with rank. It has to do with what you're doing, and we've seen this. And every time I see Kevin Shea, here at the show, I think about what a leader this guy was in FDNY and some of the things that he accomplished, some of the rescues that he did. I just think of that leadership, and a lot of people miss that. They think, oh, you got to be an officer to be a leader, and that's not the case. So we had a lot of those conversations, and man, I tell you what, I walked out of the room, and you talk about pumped up, batteries recharged. I actually walked out feeling like, holy cow, this is just a perfect time, to be thinking about some of the next steps. What do we do next? Where do we go next?
Well, certainly, and when we talk about diversity, and again, just leading back on your discussion about bench strength, one of the unique aspects here at FDIC is the diversity of our audiences. And again, that's reflected by those that are in attendance in terms of geographically, age group wise, experience wise. I mean, we have individuals that have less than a couple of years on the job, career, volunteer, and so forth, to those that, again, in the attendance of our programs, upwards of 30 or 40 plus years. And that was certainly reflective of our particular program. I had a number of great international leaders as well as national leaders in the class, all contributing. And one of the most telling comments was the fact that we are constant learners. So, whether we are instructing on one side of the table or as far as being participants on the other side and attending the classes, which we have that opportunity to do, it's all about continuing that learning process. But bench strength seems to have been a common theme. So whether we talk about bench strength in terms of leaders for those that are in succession planning, such as the leadership part of it, or bench strength from an operational standpoint, again, we talked about staffing issues dealing with fireground, and the staffing and bench strength that may not be there relative to the availability of companies or the availability of staffing. Some guys are running pretty deep with 4, which we think of that as being an optimal level, but 4 or 5. But more often than not running with 3 or 2-person staffing. So those challenges and how we deal with those issues and capabilities and leadership. So in my sense, we're talking about leadership on the fire ground, whether you are a commanding officer by rank or by position of authority, or that company officer coming in and dealing with establishing command initially and then trying to work that particular job and figuring out where we go. But one of the themes that we had, and we continue to have, I think, relative to our curriculums, is that the participants are looking for models, they're looking for templates, they're looking for guidance and direction. I mean, obviously the theme, whether we talk about leadership or we talk about operations, we understand the mechanisms and the working parts of it, but I think more often than not, the students in our classes and many programs of FDIC are looking for best practices, they're looking for lessons learned, and they're looking for models to implement that might work within their organization. So we had an opportunity to talk about, again, from our perspective, taking to the streets, buildings and looking at model approaches of understanding construction, understanding how to size up our buildings, understanding some of the dynamics, because there's so many moving parts. And again, what we've learned intuitively sometimes through book learning or street smarts, again, there's not a lot of room to try to get somebody into that more formalized lessons learned. So having a model or having a template in our various domains and disciplines provides them with a tool that can figure out what to do going back.
And that's a lot of what these folks were looking for in my class is how do you build this? They're in the how-to phase, and we talked a lot about that. And fortunately, I've developed a couple of models. It's not to say that they're the right model, but it's a way of doing some things, and we share that with them. And part of what you and I both realize is that it's for the common good of the fire service that we share and that we give things. And we were in that time period in the fire service history where there were so many strong mentors and people that were leading us and guiding us and coaching us. And then we hit that period where I think we lost some of our mentoring capability. And that's part of what I'm trying to bring back in this program is that, we provide great education. We provide great training, and there's an opportunity for experiences, and people can self-develop better today than they've ever had the opportunity to do with the use of the internet and access to just so much information quickly. But if you build a stool model like we've talked about several times on our show, those legs are not strong unless we put the cross members in, and those cross members are truly the mentors. And there's mentors at every level in your career, every level of your life, every aspect of your career, and every aspect of your life. And that's what truly makes that model strong. And when we look at that, that crosses over to what you're talking about, Chris. People that have experiences that can share about the modern fire ground and the dynamics that we're up against, some of the changes that we're seeing in building construction and the engineering components that are taking place, going back to the vintage aspects of 100 years, 150 years of building construction, and how we actually operate in these buildings and the changes that have been made. And I mean, we could talk for hours on that, but here and I know we're at the FDIC and there's so much going on, but people are hungry. And I think you mentioned that. It was just like I sit in there and there were people hanging on everything that I was telling them. There were people, I know they had to take 18, 20 pages of notes. And it was just wild to watch them write and take down that stuff. And very humbling, first of all, that they're taking to heart what we're presenting. But there's a need out there in the fire service that we've got to close some of these voids and the gaps, and we got to map those out. And we're working our areas. There are a lot of people that are working theirs, very diligently to do that. And this is a great venue to put it all together and be at.
I think that's certainly very reflective. I had an opportunity yesterday to pop in on a couple of classes, and again, our good friend, Battalion Chief Jerry Tracy, along with Jack Murphy, we're doing a phenomenal high-rise program, pre-con program. And again, the volume and the interaction, I think that is one common theme that FDIC always continues to perpetuate and embrace, is that sharing of information from a mentoring standpoint, the conduciveness within the classroom setting, whether it be the workshops or pre-cons, there's engagement, and that's what you want to have. It's not about the instructors, it's not about those that are presenting, it's about the exchange and sharing of ideas, sharing concepts, the lessons learned of what we've all learned the hard way in many instances, along with methodologies and practices that we fine-tune. So, many of our colleagues, many of our brothers and sisters that are presenting bring forward either new cutting-edge concepts and insights that have been tested out there that they're trying to expand that opportunity on, or just sticking with the fundamentals of operations on a wide variety of different things to provide a further reinforcement for those individuals that may not have experienced it, may not have had the exposure or the opportunity to learn some insights or learn firsthand, sometimes from the experts that are out there. We have phenomenal instructors that have experienced a lot of different things over the long and short end of their careers, have established some phenomenal learnings, phenomenal resources, many of the books that are available down at the bookstore and so forth that are in written print or the things that are online, DVDs and so on. So opportunities as well as what we have available. I know that in the instance of our particular programs, we have both of our online programs as far as the websites on Penn Wells Fire Engineering, Blog Talk Network and Blog Talk Radio. So we have our podcasts that are archived. We have our websites on both the fireofficer.com and firegroundleadership.com that are hosted by Penn Wells blog, radio, and a blog networking program. So a lot of information that we can readily share, as well as information that's formally within the classroom setting, as well as the stuff that takes place out in the hallways. I mean, sometimes more often than not, we have just tremendous conversations that start off for a brief hello and then turn into usually a half an hour discussions and dialogues while we're running somewhere else with many of our colleagues or people that we follow or just individuals that recognize, hey, there's something to say and to do. So phenomenal opportunities here that abound themselves throughout the entire week. But again, I think from our standpoint, we've had an opportunity here over the last 2 days, short 2 days, just to see how things are growing. You know, we look out the window here over the floor of FDIC, and you see some of the apparatus and all the exhibits getting set up. So for those of you that have not had the opportunity to experience FDIC, certainly get that on your agenda for next year. I know the dates are already out and are established on the website, but take a look at those opportunities. I know there's also sponsorships and scholarships that are available in a variety of different settings. So go to the FDIC website, for engineering website, take a look at what those opportunities afforded a lot of our brothers and sisters out there this year to provide resources to get them here, and also similar things that will come about next year. So if there's a will, there's a way. Put your money aside, but certainly coming to this particular show is phenomenal and a learning experience all the way through, and certainly not to remiss. So there's the educational part, but there's also the social part that's pretty great. ISFSI, organization that both of us have had the pleasure to serve on the executive board, both as a vice president and as a president in previous capacities. Again, tonight's their social. Every year, ISFSI has a social event for all their membership that we're able to see and meet a variety of the board, the executive board, and as well as all of the other members, and then also to sit on many of their programs that are being sponsored throughout the entire week. So that, as well as the Fools Bash, as well as a variety of other social events that continue the brother and sisterhood of what the fire service is all about. And then again, just the downtime of going to some of the restaurants and having the ability to sit down and have an impromptu dinner and so forth and socialize, which is phenomenal. I mean, it's taking the kitchen table, it's taking the day room from the fire stations and bringing it back into this phenomenal world of 30 to 45,000 firefighters in one place with fire trucks, apparatus, vendors, T-shirts, equipment. I mean, just it's everything
you name it,
that one can have. So it is a great place to be. And I've been coming for 32 years now, and you've been coming for
right at 30.
Right at 30. So it's been one hell of a ride. I started at FDIC, did my first presentation back in 1985 in Cincinnati, of all places, and I made mention of that during our class. And again, my first class at FDIC was a building construction class, and I actually had Frank Brannigan, the late Frank Brannigan, who came in and actually stood throughout the entire 90 minutes in that class. And I'm this young lieutenant doing a class on construction, and I had my mentor sit in. So it's phenomenal to see how much of that continues on today through many of that mentoring and individuals. So just a phenomenal opportunity.
And you mentioned some of the things. There's so much going on here. Stop, Drop, Rock and Roll for the Fallen Firefighters Foundation, the Cancer Comedy Show, working for the Cancer Network, the Courage and Valor Fun Run that's going on. There's so much, that's happening just day after day after day after day. The opportunities to be together. There's so much learning, so much value in the learning of the networking that occurs when we're sitting at the, a table, or we're having conversations in the hallway, or we're, meeting over a cold adult fermented hops, pops, Pilsner juice box, as my good friend Shane Ray would say. But, all this is not possible without a lot of work. And I had the opportunity in my class for Diane to pop her head in. And, when you think about what happens behind the scenes, and most people don't know this, being on the advisory board, I get to see a little more of the inner workings. But the true unsung heroes of this, nobody knows how much effort and time that is put into this by, Chief Bobby Halton, Diane Rothschild, with Ginger Mandola, with Mary Jane, with the staff and the people that are working. I just had a conversation with Ed Olmstead on the way up here, and man, I'm gonna tell you what, if you talk about getting the AV together for this and coordinating and herding the cat of instructors that's here, it's truly herding cats. And man, I'm gonna tell you what, I cannot say enough about what the staff does to make this show go on. And it's just like sitting here. There's the magician behind the curtain that you don't see that's doing all the operations for us. We get to sit on this side of the table, and all the folks that take care of us on the radio show.
It's also all the student volunteers, all the volunteers that help support the activity. So it's phenomenal. And then again, the opportunity to talk to many of the young up and coming firefighters and officers that'll be filling many of our positions in the years ahead. So, the generations are here at work all the way across with a tremendous degree of veteranship, along with a lot of young new faces that are experiencing FDIC for the first time. So again, from our standpoint, we're talking about our lessons and learnings. We have the formality of our classroom sessions, but those formalities extend out into the hallways throughout FDIC throughout the week. So, although the majority of our major activities are done in terms of formally completing our classes, we interchange, and it's a continuous journey throughout the week of learnings and insights and discussions and dialogues. It was interesting to note, one of the common themes throughout our session this morning, again, dealing with building construction, fireground operations, was again that desire to try to connect the dots, trying to connect a lot of moving parts that are out there with fire dynamics and UL and NIST and many of the great people at those organizations are presenting some good insights, big room discussions, and so on, as well as the more nuts and bolts within the classroom type setting. But I think the one thing that's common that we all share here is the desire to learn and increase our knowledge base. And that is always refreshing. I always get pumped back up, talking about recharging the batteries. It gives us that opportunity to recharge for some period of time. Normally, we start getting back on low again during the year, but FDIC certainly is that opportunity to recharge and to have the discussions with our colleagues face to face. So it's a great opportunity, great experience. And again, the learning opportunities are there from the smallest, ruralist volunteer organization to the largest metropolitan, or more importantly, the international stage of instructors and colleagues that represent the United Kingdom, Germany, Switzerland, Australia, all the way from as close as Canada in terms of crossing the border there, the Caribbean nations and so forth, Mexico. But it is a global community that truly represents FDIC International at its best. So again, Bobby Halton's leadership has provided a tremendous opportunity to not only establish, but I think forge an international global community of instructors, program, content, and a collaborative nature that is truly, a very, very small community. We all share the same problems, whether we're in Australia or Europe. We're here in a small crossroad community somewhere in the Midwest of the United States with one station and 50 firefighters. So the problems are all out there, and the opportunity to have those types of dialogues. So, one of the things that I think we all share here is that, especially in our built environment. So from my standpoint, with the common theme of taking the streets, has been all about building construction, understanding our communities, understanding our first two areas. And as we've constantly talked about, those lessons and learnings and insights about construction and fireground operations, but then it evolves from that back into the leadership component, because without the clear establishment of our personnel, understanding leadership that you focus it upon, we can't do anything. We cannot stretch the line. We can't go in. We can't deal with the right balance of tactical size, and the leadership component.
And those are the connecting of the dots that a lot of people don't realize. And, fortunately for us, we understand those connection of the dots, and we're working very hard to get a lot of people connected into those dots so that they're learning. And there are some gaps. We recognize those gaps, and we try to close those. We try to work with other instructors and places, and that's part of the mentoring that goes into the fire services, that you send people in the right directions, and you open the doors, and you make the hookups, the connections, so that they can be successful. We can't do everything for everybody, but there are enough folks out there that are very talented that can. And we're very excited that we're here at FDIC and the opportunity, and I think we actually have one of our
So being live,
come on
and
in.
again, whether we're certainly not the Johnny Carsons of the industry, we have two esteemed international colleagues that are coming in. And again, it being a live program, we're just going to bring them live and come right in here. So thank you very much, guys, for joining us here. And again, we are live and being represented right from FDIC. So I'll have you guys introduce yourself just live, talk to the camera, and this is just a dialogue and discussion about our experiences here. So Ben, if you introduce yourself.
Yeah, Ben Wolf from the UK, fire behaviour specialist, and also author of Fire Dynamics for Firefighters, co-author of Reading Fire and Fighting Fire with this gentleman here.
And my name's Shane Raffel. I'm a firefighter from Australia. 35 years service. I've been fortunate enough to travel around the world a little bit and learn from some different people. My subject is compartment fire behaviour training.
So excellent. So we have a tremendous opportunity, and thank you both of our colleagues here for joining us. We had an opportunity to talk a little bit in what we call our speaker room downstairs, where we all collectively get together after our programs and primarily review some items and sort of decompress and talk about what we've experienced there, and having this opportunity, and thanking you guys for taking a little bit of your time to come in and have an opportunity to put your faces and names to our audiences. I'm certain many of our audiences out there may have heard of your work, and certainly if they have not, we certainly want to encourage you guys to look them up, take a look at their credentials, and more importantly, understand what we call fire literacy and building literacy, and the fact that we do have a global community out there. You guys certainly have been on the leading edge of that internationally. We here in the States, I think, are still on that upward learning curve, although many of us have been students globally for many, many years, well before it became something of controversy or something of the flavor of the day, as we say, where it's now become very much common when we start hearing about some of the things. And again, to rest any of the issues out there, Steve Kerber and Dan Madrikowski did not invent fire dynamics, although many of our national colleagues think they do. But internationally, again, there's been some phenomenal things that you guys are doing in the UK and Australia, along with many of our other colleagues within the European communities. And again, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the phenomenal work of our colleague Paul Grimwood in the UK, who really established a platform many, many decades ago, and clearly gave many of us the opportunity to start becoming dialoguing, more conversant in something that you guys have. And again, when I talk about you guys, it's a New York thing. But again, what you have been doing very diligently for many, many years, and now giving us the opportunity internationally, the ability to put some things together. So thank you very much for that, and certainly Ben for your books and much of the insights, just connecting some dots out there. So talk a little bit more about what you've been doing that have gotten you here relative to the books and the contents a little bit. Just briefly about the philosophy and the methodologies of the material.
The UK, Chris, as you know, and obviously Uncle Paul's, fantastic research, and is one of the greatest scholars of the fire service, certainly in the last sort of 30, 40 years. We've used science-based techniques, but when I was down in South America training some volunteer firefighters, I was trying to communicate, the rationale behind why we fight fires in certain ways in the UK. And we didn't have any equipment at hand, and we're trying to, pass over scientific concepts. And there's a parallel track now to the data and the research that UL and NIST are putting out. And we're looking at the audience thinking, are we overwhelming them with this scientific and this mathematical information? So I looked at breaking it down into manageable chunks and simple models and concepts. And with regard to the fire dynamics, again, down in the middle of nowhere in South America, we started using any items that were to hand. So we're using the tube from either toilet roll or kitchen roll to demonstrate sort of flow paths, which again is that's a demo that we're going to be doing tomorrow in my class, putting the plug in there, but also using things like balloons to demonstrate gas laws and water application. And it grew, and it hit me on reflection on a very long flight to London from Buenos Aires that we need to be doing that in both the UK and the USA, where we've perhaps not got the luxury of our frontline firefighters being a la the Swedes, where these guys have got sort of degrees in fire engineering and fire science. And with a limited input, although in the UK in fire behaviour, a recruit would have maybe 3 weeks of input on that topic, the modern generation that want instant gratification, it's got to be taught in sort of 3-minute chunks, and again, that's what we're working towards. And this simplicity is something that you remember at 3 a.m. out on the fire call, where I know myself, I can't recall the ins and outs of mathematical formulae and micron size, at 3 a.m. when I'm there. It's got to be something simple and instant recall. And with regard to flow paths, people can visualize something and think, well, I saw the guy who covered this dude with talcum powder from the kitchen roll. I don't want to be that side of the fire. And it's a simple model that people can recall and move on. And as we developed that, it moved into the reading the fire model, and that principle was applied to an existing format that Sean had been working on for 25 years, and it's generated from there. So do you want to take it on?
Yeah, well, my speciality is reading the fire, and as Ben said, over 20 years, and it was driven by a number of line of duty deaths in my own fire department, a number of close calls, and so I became passionate about learning more about these fire phenomena. We lost 2 guys, and the coroner couldn't pinpoint what killed him. They talked about some phenomena of fire. Well, that's not good enough. We needed to say it was this, caused by that, and we can prevent it this way. So that started my journey, and I did a lot of work in setting up our training centre. And then when I went back on shift, when I started applying the knowledge, it was like shopping lists. We had long lists of information for different things. And so I need a simpler model that can be applied at 1 o'clock in the morning. And that's when we came up with smoke, air, heat, flame. And we've been trying to refine that over the years to make it a model that fits the incident commander. The guy is rolled up, he's in the hot seat, has to make those life and death decisions in a couple of seconds. And also, it also applies to the firefighter. I've tasked 2 guys to do a certain job. They have to conduct their own smoke, air, heat assessment at a task level where they are. So yeah, we were just striving to simplify those models and make them something that you can cognitively apply under great stress.
That's a great common theme, because when we talk about much of what we are all modeling, and Doug, you've been involved with some of our Spartan burns and some of the activities here with NIST and so forth. The one thing I think all of us are sharing, which is connecting that dot, is providing simplicity in these models in a very complex, demanding world of our profession. Whether it be reading smoke, fire dynamics, relative to some of the other aspects of predictability, or reading the building. I mean, we all share commonalities of structural fires and the dynamics of fire within those particular buildings, and how to reduce injuries and line of duty deaths, of which all of us have experienced, and all of us share the same belief of how to understand the predictability of those conditions, and how to identify tools and mechanisms that the various individuals, whether it be the commanding officers, whether it be the company officers at the supervisor level, or the firefighters at the tactical level. So it's some great stuff. I think the information that those our listeners may not be aware of, I certainly encourage them to reach out to you individually, or at least nothing else, get the textbooks, get the information, do your Google searches online, get some information out there, and take a look at and increase your both building and fire literacy on a variety of different levels. So I know we're sort of getting close to our ending time. I certainly want to thank my esteemed international colleagues, number one, for meeting face-to-face for the first time. Ben, for seeing you here again this year. We're on the front end of a phenomenal conference here, and the collaborative efforts that many of us will share going forward here in the hallways of FDIC and in many of the other pubs and so forth as we continue all of this. So again, thank you very much for just popping in, and again, I would encourage our listeners to look both of our international colleagues up, as well as Doug and I. Certainly want to forget about that with what we're doing. So we're going to complete this edition of Taking It to the Streets. I thank our listeners that are joining live, and those that may be listening. To our esteemed colleagues, thank you very much for participating. And more importantly, thank you very much for allowing us, the FDIC community, to get some tremendous insights from the international perspective. We all are students, whether we're teaching or whether we're on the other side of it. So thank you very much. So again, I want to reach back out to 3M, Scott Fire and Safety, for their sponsorship of our program and their continued sponsorship throughout the FDIC series with some of their activities each and every day, and certainly for the live Google program. So I'm your host, Chris Naum. Until next time, this is Taking You to the Streets on your street, in your world. Thanks very much, and stay safe, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Unusual. Was it 273 273? What was the time 1818 for time? Was it 273 273?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave McGlynn. First, I want to start by thanking 3M Scott Fire and Safety for sponsoring this. Without them, we wouldn't be able to make this part possible. So thanks for joining us live at from FDIC. Today, I'm joined with three special guests on behalf of the NFPA 3000 update. We got John Montez from NFPA. He's the Emergency Response Specialist. That's right. Chief Otto Drozd from Orange County Fire and Rescue in Florida. And then Lieutenant Steve Hamilton from Fort Jackson Fire Department. So thanks for coming, guys. Thank you. Thanks. So we'll start off this NFPA 3000 thing. Big talk the past month or so, right? How did it all begin?
Well, I guess that would go to me because really after the Pulse incident, I really looked at what was best practice in our industry. And really what we found was an alphabet soup of every agency you could think of, from the FBI, the Interagency Group, Hartford Consensus, IFF, IFC, and some that we're not even speaking about, but they all had some type of guidance. So really what I thought, it was time to really synthesize all the best practice that was out there into one document that everybody could rely on. And NFPA was that entity that has been known for creating standards within our industry.
Explain the committee structure and how it's different from other committees.
So I just want to tag on what Chief Drozd said first, and so Chief Drozd put in a request, and before he did that, he got a lot of consensus even before he put in the request of most of the fire service organizations, and then a request came into the NFPA, and a lot of people think, oh, the NFPA, they just make the standards based on what they think is needed, or some people even call us arbitrary. But the fact is that we make the standards based on what's needed for the fire service, because the fire service tells us what's needed, and not just the fire service, other services. So when this standard came in, or this request came in, we put it out to the public, and we said, hey, public, for 3 months in October of 2016 through January of 2016, we said, what do you think we should do? And we received hundreds of comments back, and 97% were supportive of creating a new standard. We also, at the same time, asked for applications, and we received 103 applications, which is the most for any NFPA committee ever. Even some of the bigger ones, like the Life Safety Code, the Healthcare Code, even bigger than those committees. It was the most we've ever received in one shot. So we put all this information forward to the Standards Council, which is kind of the governing body within the organization for our standards. And in April of 2017, they said, we're going to form this committee based on all these applications. And now most committees are 30 people. It's not a hard cap, but we try and make them manageable because the committees are the ones that write the standards. That's another common misconception, is some guy in an office writes the standard. It's not. It's the committees that write it. It's the committees of experts representing you out there on the street. And we actually made this committee 46 members.
Okay.
And the reason we did that was because it had to represent all the different bodies and organizations that have a reason to be involved in this development. This isn't just a fire service thing. This isn't just a law enforcement thing. It's not an EMS thing. It's everybody's thing. And that includes emergency management, healthcare, private security, facility management. So it was a challenge to not only create a committee for this, but to make one that's balanced, meaning that, we have these things called user categories. So manufacturers, labor, enforcer, they put all the applications into a category. So the committee has to be balanced in categories, and also has to be balanced in representation of all these different disciplines.
Is that one of the largest committees?
It's the largest,
The largest committee.
the largest.
Yeah, and I'd just like to clarify one thing. While I was a proposer of it, John is absolutely right. There was lots of people that had supported that effort. Really, the process for putting that proposal forward wasn't done in a vacuum. I reached out to the IFC, the IFF, the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Association, Florida Fire Chiefs, the U.S. Fire Administration. And really everybody came to consensus that through the proliferation of events that have been ramping up, and we're seeing more and more. In fact, in the last 2 days, we've had 2 shootings, and really our history with active shooter goes all the way back to 1966 with the Texas Tower shooting, and then it's really accelerated to where we've had some of the worst mass shootings, starting with Virginia Tech in 2007, the Pulse in 2016, and then recently Vegas, which surpassed all of them.
One, hats off to you for spearheading that project. It's great. I would say you were touching on it. So on the, I would assume from the outside agencies, outside of the fire service, there is some of that confusion as to when this gets implemented, which is when, May 1st.
Yeah, so it comes out May 1st.
So a lot of your law enforcement, maybe some EMS, they're going to say, well, NFPA is fire agency. How is that applicable to us? So, I know that that's going to be a question on a lot of people's minds because I've already heard it myself. So I just was asking it on you guys.
So, it's a question we hear a lot, and I'll defer to Chief Drozd on this, but I'll say that, there's a lot of things out there that are in the background that people don't even realize are standards that come from the NFPA. And we're certainly not just for the fire service. The fire service is definitely important to us, but we do more for others.
Yeah, and that's a question we had. Was NFPA the right place to do this? But so what we looked at is NFPA creates all manner of standards, almost 300 different standards that are out there. And their process, as John intimated, was that they bring people from all different industries together. So when we looked at the standard and what it had to do, we knew that it had to gather in order to be relevant within public safety. And when I say public safety, that goes far beyond just the fire service. It includes all public safety, because really the approach to NFPA, which we're going to get into, is a little bit unique. NFPA 3000 is a little bit unique from what we've seen in the past. So really we wanted something that had credibility, had experience at building standards, because this is a standard, not a best practice, not a guidance, not a recommendation. This is a standard, and NFPA was well suited to provide us with that credibility.
So yesterday in class, you mentioned, John, 2 NFPA standards that were great examples that are not fire service standards.
Sure.
And what were those?
So one is the healthcare code, NFPA 99, and then the other is the National Electrical Code. So not fire standards, but hugely broadly accepted standards throughout the country. 99 is used by the Joint Commission and by CMS, and the National Electrical Codes in many, many states across the United States in different years adopted. And, a lot of people don't even realize that those are NFPA standards, but they are.
Yeah. Before we go any further, I'm going to throw the phone number out there because I know we're live, and if anybody wants to call in and has any questions for these guys, which I'm sure you would, the phone number is going to be 760-454-8852. That's 760-454-8852. We'll take your guys' phone calls. Like I said, take advantage of the opportunity of having the 2 of them here, the 3 of them here, to be able to answer some of your questions. So talking about that whole thing with the, it being the fire standard, or it being perceived as just a fire service agency thing, and you guys were elaborating, almost like an alphabet soup. You have, IFF and IFC and the FOP and everybody, every different type of letter that's out there was part of it. Yeah, there you go. So you got a lot of stakeholders, in this. So with the different stakeholders, law enforcement, EMS, fire departments, what challenges did that create, if any?
Oh gosh, there was a lot of challenges. So when we brought all those stakeholders into the room, which 46 of them representing, we have positions on the committee, law enforcement from the operations side, from the chief level as well, the union or the labor union sides for both police, fire, single service EMS. You have hospital systems, EM were involved, and the federal government in many different areas were involved as well. So the first day of the committee, we had all these people in the committee, and the first 45 minutes we argued on what to call it. So we really had to call a timeout, and we agreed to build it first and name it at the end. And really, when I articulate to what we were trying to accomplish within that room with all these user groups that had really never gotten together in a significant way. The fire service is like a big tent. We fit a bunch of people into that tent within our service. We have volunteers, combination department, careers departments that are serving every town, city, burg, village, county within the United States. So what we wanted to do was bring all those others under the tent, and not only bring them under the tent with the standard, but bring them under the tent so that they could be comfortable under it. And so the standard was built to accommodate all those disparate groups, and really it was tough coming to consensus, but I can tell you when the group voted on approving the standard and sending it to the Standards Council for approval, I don't think there was not even one dissenting vote out of the group.
Yeah, and no comments either. It was just unanimous, send it.
See, that's impressive. That's just from my end, I see the importance and the value of the standard. Is we've all been fire scenes and emergency scenes, and come from different backgrounds in emergency services, and we don't play well together. We're always arguing over whose sandbox it really is. So to hear that, to get that kind of feedback, I feel like that in itself defines the importance of the standard. It's all of these, what would be perceived as opposing agencies came together unanimously to make sure that this thing went through. That's kind of impressive. I mean, if you think about it, at the end of the day, especially for you two, all the hard work that went into it, and then having that happen, that's pretty impressive.
I would say that that's certainly a credit to the committee members and the guests that were there, because early on, they kind of set a rule for themselves that was like, we're going to get to unanimous consensus before we move on to something else. And they would duke it out. I mean, they had to call a special meeting for an entire day on one subject.
That's right.
And it didn't matter. They were gonna find a way to get there. And it's just amazing that in the amount of time that they had, which wasn't very much, and the amount of dedication that all of them, folks like Otto and Steve did to get us there, is just incredible.
Yeah, and to add on to that, there was a lot of conversations that happened within the industry outside of that room. Because remember who was represented there. You had a volunteer combination and career departments there. So I know I had phone calls with the board of volunteer organizations that were concerned with the impact that the standard would have on their departments, on their towns, on their ability to provide services. So when we talk about that big tent, we made accommodations in there so everybody can play in the same sandbox.
Yeah, you eliminated the fear of the unknown, which is kind of nice.
That's right.
And as you said, the committee is comprised of 46 members, but there were guests. So
Oh, yeah.
my status is I was a guest. I assisted in things as a guest. So that 46, I think in Orlando was what, close to 70 people.
70, yeah.
So it add more on top of the 46 of people passionate and having positions and hashing things out. But the fact that all those individuals could come together under one opinion, yes, let's go, we approve. This was
It's impressive.
tremendous work.
Yeah, it's impressive. So this standard was fast tracked, right? So what is fast track? How did that, how's that change the timeline or anything like that?
Yeah, so it was interesting because, when we put this together, of course, from the Pulse incident to now, there's a lot of events, active shooter events that happened. And, just yesterday, there was the ramming in Canada that killed several people. And then there was a fire today that there was a shooting at a fire, but luckily no firefighter was injured. But we get all of these. So when we were putting together the standard, we were saying there's a critical need within our industry right now, because what we found in event after event, in the after actions, a lot of the same issues were emerging. So the need to put forward a standard was critical. So as we started working through it, there's a little known provision which is called the provisional standard process within NFPA. And in fact, I asked a good friend of mine who works for NFPA, do you know about the provisional standard? And he goes, I've never heard of it because it's so rarely used. Only twice in the 121-year history of NFPA was a provisional standard used. And John could probably explain what that is a little bit better.
Yeah, so the way that happened was, normally a standard takes 3 years to write. So if you look at the timeline, in April of 2017, the committee was formed. They had their first meeting in June of 2017. And, you're targeting 3 years from then for the standard to be done. But they were aggressive as a group, and they dedicated their time and their efforts, and the NFPA dedicated our time and efforts to support them to make this happen. So by November, which was interesting, we met in November for 1 day, and we had just met in Orlando in September for 3 days. And the week after we met in Orlando, the Vegas incident occurred. And the committee was like, we gotta do something.
Obvious sign right there.
Yeah, we gotta do something. There's an urgent need. So when we met in November, the committee unanimously voted to petition the NFPA to do whatever the NFPA could to get this out faster. And so the provisional standard process is actually a process within ANSI, which is the American National Standards Institute, and that's who accredits the standards. They're the accrediting body over our standards. And we followed that process and then our own internal process by getting approval from our Standards Council and our Board of Directors, both unanimous, to fast track this. And so then we had to come up with a schedule of how to do that. And one of the things within those rules is technically you don't have to ask for input from the public, but we felt strongly that the public needs to have a voice in this standard. It's very important. So from January 5th through February 23rd, we opened it up for input from the public as a draft. We made sure everybody knew it was a draft, and we actually received 807 inputs, which is the most of any of the standards I've worked on. And I have the 1500 series, and I have the EMS documents and hazmat, and it never comes close.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. So you've looked at these other standards, look at how many people poured in feedback. I mean, that's just such an obvious need for something like this.
Absolutely. So the committee met in March, and we had a marathon week in March for 4 days, and they reviewed every single input, and they determined not so much the normal process of, accepting or, or accepting with comment or not using it or resolving it without using it. Instead, they said, we're going to refresh the whole thing. We're going to look through these inputs and see which ones we find are useful to what we're doing as we refresh it, and which ones we find are not as useful. And we're going to refresh the whole thing. And in 4 days, they went through that whole document over and over again.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Oh, yeah, and so that was another unique part of NFPA 3000. So first of all, you have all the disparate groups that are there that had never come together in this type of effort. That's the first thing. That would lend itself to the process taking longer, not shorter. So we had them all within the same room doing that. But to their credit, they all came with a common purpose. And that common purpose was to provide our industry with something that would help protect their operators in the field and help protect their communities. And so the uniqueness is that although they were this disparate group, and although it had the most public comments of almost any standard, we were able to get it done. And not only get it done, but get it done in a 12-month period rather than a 36-month period.
And correctly. It's not just that it was done expedited and it's done correctly.
Yeah,
Like you said before, you guys had reviewed, which ones were relevant and for consideration for modification. Well, I mean, I'm quite sure that the standard is relevant and correct. So that's another thing that's impressive is, sometimes in our business we get reactive and we put out a bad product and then we find out that because we reacted, the product failed. But you guys did it right. It's like I said, it's very impressive because there's such a need for it.
And certainly the committee did an amazing job of really closely thinking about, as Chief Drost said, about, how does this affect not just the big metro department or it was for everybody and across not just the fire service, but law enforcement, EMS, emergency management, the entire community. They did, there was such careful thought that went into those parts of it. Really impressive and most amazing thing I've ever seen in my career.
That was the great thing about the public comment is you got to see the response from 100% of the fire service. It wasn't geared towards metro versus rural. You had all those comments and they were coming from all different parts of the country, and it helped shape the standard to what it is. There were a lot of things that were overlooked where a public input made, oh wow, that's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Change the wording, do this, do that. It was great to get that.
So how would you summarize the intent of this standard?
So the intent of the standard is really, it's a whole community approach. So really it's taken really from the beginning of what a community would need to do in the preparation phases, the prevention phases, the intelligence phases, to the actual response and everything that goes within a response to the recovery. And when we talk about recovery, it's early, midterm, and long-term recovery. And when we talk about whole community, there's a lot of people that need to be considered when you're looking at what the impact of a single event could have on a community. I can tell you, in the aftermath of the Pulse incident, we went to many services for people that lost their lives. There was, there was assistance centers for the families and the victims that had to be stood up. So what we wanted to do within the standard, and these are not unique just to the Orlando area, when they look at this, it includes the entire gambit, not just the operational side that sometimes can be narrowly focused and not look at all the downstream effects that an event like this can have within a community.
So there's been a lot of talk about the standard having multiple themes. Can you elaborate on those themes?
Sure. So, and the chief kind of covered on two of them. So the first one is that it is an entire community's responsibility and burden to prepare, respond, and recover to these incidents. And the committee designed the document so that every piece of a community, from the public to responders to non-governmental organizations, emergency management, healthcare, you name it, they thought about it. Everybody has a little bit of a role to play, and then there's state level partners and federal level partners, and there's just so much that goes into it. And they wanted to make sure that they gave, as the chief described, that umbrella for the entire community. I mean, if your clothes were on fire, what would you do?
Stop, drop, and roll.
If there was a shooter that came in the door, would you know what to do?
No.
And that's the thing. So you as a citizen, there's things you need to learn, and And we've done such a good job. The fire service has done a great job of educating the public on evacuating buildings when the fire alarm goes off, or stop, drop, and roll, and other things. There's no reason why we can't do the same with this and teach that next generation, and prepare them. You know, I'm sure back in the, you know, whenever it was that stop, drop, and roll started, it was
taboo.
It was taboo, you know, like, what do you mean your clothes are on fire, you know? But now it's, you know,
Such a common thing.
such a common thing. So,
That should be what this should be. I agree with you.
so that's one. Another is, as the chief said, recovery. You have to plan for recovery today. And the committee felt very strongly that recovery is so critical. And as the chief described, it just goes on for forever. And the whole community feels it. You know, one of the things that, and I like to tell this story from the public inputs because I think it's really valuable, is the committee got a bunch of public inputs that said, well, why don't you just follow the National Disaster Response Framework for Recovery? There's already a good framework for recovery. The committee was like, sure. As a matter of fact, there were several people helping write the document that wrote that. And they said, but recovery from a disaster is different than recovery from an active shooter hostile event. There's no such thing as short-term recovery. You don't put people back in their homes and turn the power back on and they're good to go. Yeah. So they change some of the way you prepare for recovery based on that. Then the last two things is unified command. I'll let the chief speak to that, and integrated response. So working different organizations, different, you know, agencies, working together in an integrated manner in some way, shape, or form to mitigate and manage the incident.
Which doesn't always, Chief, you know, which doesn't always happen. You know, we stress the idea of unified command, but we don't practice it as good as we should.
Yeah, and part of the reason because it's easy to and comfortable to stay in your own silo, to stay within your own realm. But what we're advocating through NFPA 3000 is that we train together, we practice together, we do risk assessments together, so that when the event comes, we can stand shoulder to shoulder with our partners in law enforcement. If they're single service EMS within the community, we stand shoulder to shoulder with them. We count on the hospital's EM and, you know, command, certainly within the initial phases of it. When you talk about unified command, certainly law enforcement is going to be the lead agency. But as the incident transitions, then it may be that EM plays a prominent role at different phases of the incident. But what we wanted and what was critical and what we found in after action is that command piece, which within the fire service, we've been talking about it since the 70s, and that coordination piece with police. In some communities, it's very good, but not in all. And what we wanted to do was stress how important that is to get your arms around the incident as quickly as possible, and how that is going to assist in the resolution of the incident.
Sure. Yeah, phone call.
Nice, here we go.
It's
Hey.
Mike in Florida.
Mike, how you doing? This is Dave.
Good. I have two questions. First one is, what were the biggest challenges in developing something of this scope? And secondly, how do you plan on getting not just the buy-in, but the execution of the standard across the board, across all disciplines? It's going to involve quite a public education and awareness effort, I would imagine.
So I'll let Chief answer the first one, and I'll try and tackle the second one.
So buy-in, that's going to be certainly the difficult portion of it. So we built the standard and we got the buy-in within the room, but you're absolutely right. Now it's going to go out to the communities, and in each community, there's different dynamics. So really, well, what it's going to take is people seeing that there is a need and that this type of event could happen within any community. If, in fact, during the process of building it, there was incidents that happened, and at one point they were saying, well, the risk assessment in a small community, really the chances of that happening are slim to none. But then the incident at the church in Texas happened in a very small community. And I received a phone call from somebody that says, you know what, we had talked about this, and you're right, it could happen anywhere. So really we hope that that's the impetus to really get the buy-in, knowing that it can happen anywhere, from Parkland, Florida to Orlando, Florida to Las Vegas, to Texas. It can happen anywhere. So the buy-in is really critical to that, and that's not going to be easy. As we go through the process, this is the provisional standard, but the committee is going to go right back to work on building and going through the whole 36-month process right after this comes out. And there's a training component that's coming out as well. So hopefully with all these things and identifying the needs throughout the community, and eyes are on this from throughout the world as well. Hopefully that will begin to get the buy-in.
And to Mike's question too, so we're gonna, obviously organically, we want people to see it, read it, and hopefully see the value in it and use it. Because it's unique in that it's for the entire community, what I like to say to people is find the things that are relevant to you and implement them. This isn't about, adopting this standard like the normal life safety code adoption process. This is a provisional standard. It's new subject matter. So find the things that are unique and relevant to you and the role that you play and implement those things, and then encourage your partners to do the same. And really be the evangelist for bringing the community together. The other thing is the standard isn't going to prevent these things from happening. It's not about that. It's about helping the community be better prepared to mitigate the impact. So it's about bringing everyone together so that you're ready. And you're never going to be perfectly ready. I don't believe that. But at the same time, things go better when you've had that discussion, you've had that practice together, you work together. The approach.
And a good example of the buy-in, right? When we talked about it being applicable to all size of departments, whether volunteer, combination, career, a good example of that is when we had the discussion on the ballistic protection, right? So
that was the biggest challenge, Mike, in case you were wondering.
Yeah. So the way we were able to get buy-in in that case is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's provisions within the standard that have flexibility in them, and we believe that will create the buy-in. And what I mean by that specifically, within Orange County, we bought the ballistic protection, and we have it for every riding seat. But the standard doesn't dictate that. What it does say is, if you're going to have ballistic protection, it should be of a certain type for these types of events. If you're going to have a rescue task force or an entry team made up of both police and fire, then you need to provide the appropriate protection for their area of operation. So it's very flexible. It doesn't mean that everybody has to have it, but you need to provide it. And the way that a department gets it there is based on their means to provide it.
I think another.
I have one last follow-up question, if I can. Do you think one of the measures of the success of the standard will be when we start seeing less and less repeated, the same failures that are noted incident after incident, and when those failures, for lack of a better word, are recognized and addressed, so they're not happening again?
Absolutely, and I think where you see a manifestation of that is in the Vegas shooting. There was, there was great time and effort taken to coordinate between police and fire, and the results proved it out. Even though that was the worst mass shooting, the coordination between the agencies there are really an example and really where we're trying to get through to with the standard.
And I think part of that is also how you apply the standard as to the success of such an event. And as we stated before, you have preparation, response, and recovery. This document is the only document that covers all three of those things in conjunction in one source. And if you follow the document and you distribute it throughout the community to all the organizations that have a stake in an event, and you do planning, response, recovery, the outcome of that event will more than likely be more positive than not having anything at all.
As we say in Florida, the time to build a house is not during a hurricane. So like you said about the relationships and the communications with Las Vegas and those types of things, by having that in place across the disciplines in preparation of an incident, obviously we know in the fire service is beneficial, and it's just trying to get the others engaged, whether it's the private sector or other areas as well.
Absolutely.
And we hope that, you know, we can tell success stories relatively quickly so that those other organizations and entities that aren't used to dealing with standards can say, okay, you know what, this isn't so bad.
More receptive.
Yeah, you know, if we can, and certainly, please, everyone go to www.nfpa.org/3000 and sign up for alerts, because really soon we already are going to be putting up stories talking about why 3000. Chief Drozd was videoed telling his story personally about why it's important to him. There's several committee members that have responded to these incidents that you've seen on television over the years. And they tell their stories about the things they wish they knew ahead of time. We have one committee member now who, you know, amazing story of survival. He was shot 15 times, police officer. And, you know, he tells his story and it's just incredible, you know, and that guy's a warrior, you know, and just an amazing guy. And, you know, he talks about why it's so important to him. He's been in 2 incidents. So we want those stories. We want to hear from people. We want to engage. And at the same time, you know, we're creating some tools and resources. We're creating some online learning that's going to go with it. It's a badging program, and the first series of the badging program is going to roll out, and that's all about planning. And then there'll be one for response and one for recovery. And it's all based on the content of the standard. We're building some checklists so people can use these checklists as they make their programs. And we hope that, you know, people use this stuff and really engage with us. The more we learn, the better it's going to become in the future.
Yeah, and I think what you're going to see is you're going to see people that are early adopters of the standard, and you're going to see their incidents go one way, and possibly the town right next door, the incident goes the other way. And this is going to be the impetus for the change that we're seeking through NFPA 3000.
Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else? So going back into the standard, there's like 80 pages of document and 20 chapters. So what's the process for developing that many chapters?
Mostly pain, some teeth pulling.
Good answer.
A lot of fighting, thumb wars to decide who wins. No, so, you know, the committee drives that. So I'll let Otto and Steve speak to it, but they determined what was the relevant topics first. They kind of drove it from there.
Yeah, so just briefly, you know, when you look at 20 chapters, and it seems like a lot, but in order to provide that whole community integrated approach to it, we really wanted to make sure that we had all the resources there for somebody that's picking the document up cold and saying, okay, we want to start from ground zero to be having a comprehensive approach to this. The standard does that through the many chapters that are there.
And when we sat down and looked at a chapter and broke into task groups and started tackling writing the body of the standard for that chapter, on more than one occasion, it was decided this needs to be split. And we need a chapter on this aspect, and we need an additional chapter on this aspect. And as John said, the committee drove it and drove how many chapters there were. And if you look at it again, prepare, respond, recover, to fully encompass those 3 ideologies, that's a lot of content. And I'm actually surprised that we kept it at 20. I really thought it would be more than that.
Oh, we had more.
Oh, yeah.
And we
Yeah.
whittled it
And a lot
down
more
to 20.
pages too.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, and one of the things, and that actually is a really great point, you know, the committee started with a lot more detail and it was very almost granular. And as they went through things, they were like, no, we gotta go up a level, gotta go up a level. And that goes back to that umbrella concept of it can't be that granular because then it's hard for everyone to adopt it. The other thing that I think is interesting within those 20 chapters is they're not very long. If you think about it, 20 chapters coming out at 80 pages, it's not that big, you know. I mean, there's standards that are 300 pages.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing, you know, because it's user friendly.
That's a perfect word.
It's
Fireman friendly.
What did you say most frequently? That's tactics.
That's tactics.
That's tactics. We're not getting into tactics. That's tactics. That's tactics.
I said that 1,000 times to them.
But to the credit, that's what makes the standard broad and allows you to apply it to any community, any jurisdiction, any response size, because we didn't get into tactics. We kept it at ideology.
Yeah.
We kept it at that level.
You stay focused on the process.
Yeah, and tactics is a local thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's so dependent on your local resources and capabilities. How can you? They couldn't do that. So.
So in the standard, chapters 13 and 14, they cover competencies for the law enforcement, for the fire department, for EMS. So what is a competency and how's that different from a JPR?
So competencies is knowledge of. What we're saying is you shall have knowledge of this. So what does that mean? It means read it. You need to have read it. So APR's job performance requirements is about demonstrate. And when you see the language, it'll say demonstrate the ability to drive through an obstacle course if you're doing driver operator stuff. And that's show it. We kept everything in the competency section as a read it. Read me. Read it. As opposed to JPRs, which is show me, show it, demonstrate that you can perform the function.
And we fully expect that communities are going to take, you know, the competencies and say, okay, how do we build upon the foundation to really meet the objectives of those competencies?
And when you look at, if you think about what the competencies are in those chapters, so we talk about active shooter, fire as a weapon, vehicle used as a weapon or vehicle-borne weapon, IDLH atmospheres, things like that. If you were to demonstrate certain things in there, it would be very hard to avoid that task, that tactics conversation. That's tactics. It would be difficult to get into that world and keep that. I can't imagine how that would be a long conversation. That would be very
That'd be a challenge. And the other piece is by doing knowledge of, we can say things like knowledge of local procedures for X.
Yeah.
Right? And that puts it back on you to have your local tactics. And the knowledge point is to teach your people.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of a smart way to, I think the committee was brilliant when they wrote it that way, because, you know, as someone who was a chief at one point in my life, that would help me, because then I would say, wait a minute, I don't have a procedure for that.
Yeah.
Better get on that, you know, and come up with it and then teach my people.
So before we close it out, I'm just going to throw a number out there, see if we have anybody else to call in. The number is 760-454-8852. We don't have any callers yet. Okay. So I'll close it with, this is new. You know what I mean? We're, like we said, May 1st. A lot went into it from a lot of different agencies, and it was fast tracked. But we're ever changing in our business. You know, we're always changing gears because we have to adapt. 20 years ago, we were never talking about active shooters. You know, here we are having a conversation, and there's a standard for it now. So what what's the future for NFPA 3000? And where do you guys see it in the future?
Gosh, to me, when we discuss this, certainly 3000 is the start. But when you talk about the competencies and you talk about the different types of competencies that are in there right now, fire as a weapon, the active shooter, the ramming incident, and all the ones that are in there today, really the standard is designed to evolve over time, because we know that terrorism and these types of events have evolved from focusing on critical infrastructure to looking at soft targets of opportunity. So the standard is made to evolve. And in fact, we believe that in subsequent iterations of the standard, what will happen is there'll be things in there that we're not even contemplating today. But that next event or that next type of event is peeking its head around the corner today. We just don't know it yet. But with the standard and all the elements that are in there, we're going to be prepared for that next one to address it in a very comprehensive way with the groups that have been assembled and really give communities the best chance at providing for the victims and preventing a lot of these things from happening. Now, when we look at some of those competencies also, it's very possible, just like with other standards, that there's spin-offs of NFPA 3000, because when you look at competencies, just like the hazmat standard, there's a portion for the awareness level, the operations level, the technician level. It's very possible that there could be spin-offs that we do get into those things that go beyond competencies, that go into the JPRs, into certifications for certain people. That's normal for our service. That happens. Yeah. And we want to get better, and we want to assure that the folks that we're charging with responding within these incidents have the best chance at success. And that best chance at success is through training and putting those things in place that are going to make this muscle memory within our industry. Just like we train in many other facets of the fire service to where we arrive on scene and we don't even think about, that's right. So to me, our response and the coordination between our police brethren has to be like muscle memory. And that is done, like you said, through repetition.
And I was just going to add that 3000 is not just an opportunity for the industries to come together, but it's also an opportunity for the NFPA to learn and grow. And we're doing some things with this standard that we've never done before. And one of those, as an example, is we're developing this online learning and this badging program. Another that we're doing is we're creating some online tools and resources. We're developing ways to tell the story about the why NFPA and why 3000. And the next thing that we're doing, which is new and different, is we're going to offer it as a subscription instead of as just a PDF that you pay X amount of dollars for and you download. And in this way, you buy the subscription, so you don't just get this edition, but in 2 years, when the next edition comes, you get that one too. You get the update, and it'll be like on your phone, like an ebook that you can highlight, you can cut, and you can find those pieces that are relevant to you, or on your iPad or your Surface or whatever device you use. And so that's new and different for us. We're trying to not just offer it and say, here it is, but to also evolve with it. And, and our stakeholders are telling us that they need more digital product from the NFPA. And so we're going to give it to you. And
but the hard copy will still be
the hard copy's still there. You can order
some
it.
people feel comfortable with something in their hands.
Yeah, and the hard copy comes out May 1st.
I'm an old school guy, man. I like my papers too. And I'm young, but I've just been bred by the old school guys.
Yeah, definitely comes out May 1st.
And how 3000 started with this push from public service entities responding, and chiefs role with that, it'll grow in the same manner. So I'd be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that if we're here at the Fire Department Instructors Conference, and yesterday we had the opportunity to present this material to students, and a lot of the feedback as this standard is put out there in venues such as this, as well as when they try to use it, that feedback will help the standard grow. And hey, I really think you should have this. I really think you should add that. Here's an aspect. And I believe I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. Thank you to Bobby Halton and Diane Rothschild for allowing this venue to be here for this platform, and their staff and everybody that worked really hard to be here. It was an honor to be here for this, and it was an honor for this to be such a big presentation for people to roll this out and say, hey, look at this, check it out, and not only try to implement it, but tell us what you think, which goes back to that online platform that John's talking about.
Yeah, because it May 1st it comes out, and almost immediately it's going to be open for public input again. So the opportunity to tell us what you think and where you want it to go next starts right away.
Yeah.
And that's the best way to do it, is to put that input in and tell the committee directly what you want.
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Steve. FDIC's huge stage. And as I've been saying throughout this whole discussion is how important this standard really is. God forbid, but it can happen anywhere in the entire United States. And we're the ones that are called, in every, form, whether it's law enforcement, EMS, however it is, on through, we're the ones that we're the problem solvers, that they want us to come and fix the problem. So I agree that we're doing a great job pushing this message out there and getting it marketed. And thanks to Bobby and Diane also, with FDIC. I mean, what bigger stage to broadcast something like this? This is of this magnitude. So yeah, I thank you guys for your time with this. Like I said, you got your, I'm a huge supporter on it, and I like that. I like that. This standard, unlike a lot of other ones, and that's no offense to NFPA, is just it's so it's not an end all be all. It's so open for change, and that's what we need in this business.
Right, and there's one more point that should be made. This is not just for the large active shooter event. This is for the everyday response to violent events as well. There's something in there for everybody. Departments around our country are responding every day to violent events, and what the standard does is normalize some of the practices that can be used on a daily basis throughout the country, not just on the large event.
Again, I want to thank 3M Scott Fire and Safety for having us be able to do the live from FDIC, and thank you guys for listening. Take care and be safe.
Thanks for tuning in to Fire Engineering Talk Radio. Each week, our hosts will introduce you to a various cast of characters you will only find here. Each host will share experience, knowledge, and expertise regarding their years in the fire service, allowing you to call in and speak with them live. An experience you can only find on Fire Engineering Talk Radio. So thanks for joining us. Enjoy and stay safe.
Hey, welcome to Fire Engineering Talk Radio and to our show, The Command Post. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my partner,
John Salka.
Chief John Salka, who John just tortured himself the past couple of weeks in Cancun, somewhere on a beach or whatever. And now he's all tired because 2 weeks in the ocean playing with dolphins and starfish and all whatever you do down there, and you don't even drink, and you just had a great time.
Imagine?
It was awesome, wasn't it?
Yep, it was great.
Okay, I know every year, but
Back
hey,
to work.
Hey, we're sponsored today by 3M Scott Fire and Safety, and they're proud sponsor of today's Fire Engineering's Trusted Voices radio show live from FDIC 2018, and here we are. I'm looking out that window at the rigs like we do every year.
Just checking them out. Yep.
What a great day already.
Yep.
Great day already. Great day yesterday.
So far, so good. Yeah, yesterday was good. Today was our first presentation, which went well. Our chief officer's school this morning was well attended. Good crowd. They participated. They answered questions. We got a couple of laughs out of them. They threw some stuff out at us, which was good.
Room was packed.
Every seat was full, which was good. We always like that. I'm sure that was registration. It was driven by registration, I'm sure. But it was very good. And
I think it's the picture we put near you.
We had mostly chief officers, some company officers aspiring to be chiefs. It was obviously primarily a chief's class. That's what was the title of it. And it was the first run for us. We just recently finished it and put it together. Obviously, it's going to be a longer class than what we did today. We did a half a day today, 4 hours. It's probably going to end up being a full day class when we fully develop it. But we had a good morning at least.
Well, and I appreciate you. This is the first year. I mean, we've been coming to FDIC since the early '90s, and then since our parent company Penwell bought it in '96. But I don't know what happened. We've been sick before, like outside. We're doing outside stuff. You catch whatever. But the allergies here, I was just so
whining all day.
I don't know what Doc McAvoy gave me, but it's working. I feel much better. But it was just, this morning was tough. But John took it and ran with it and did a great job as always. The concept behind that program, we were explaining, because we did it in 4 hours, which we ran 10 minutes over, and there is like 8 hours. A lot of our stuff, in fact, we did 5-alarm leadership here for forever. And that's an 8-hour day that we've always, when they told us we need to move everything to 4 hour, package. And I understand that, John, it's, as much as it hurt us going from 8 to 4, what it meant for the hot attendee was now they get 4 classes to pick up in 2 days instead of just 2.
Listen, nobody dislikes doing 8 hours in a class more than me. So going to 4 hours was just fine.
Well, and it worked out good. But then the concept for this class, for a lot of our folks watching us and listening in, and John and I have been doing our company officer academy among other programs for years now. And that class came about because we're doing all kinds of leadership and chief and officer and company officer and all these different things and tactics and so on and so forth. A lot of folks are saying, look, there's just not a whole lot of good quality training out there for company officers. There's stuff like our state association has something, or state chiefs or whatever, but the real life, like talk to me about what goes on in the firehouse. I think some of the stories, some of the lessons learned from your career, from the FDNY, I'm constantly begging you to tell stories. I'm like, tell that one, because it just hits home. You see a lot of light bulbs coming. People go, oh, that's me, or I went through that, or
a lot of the guys relate much better to stories than they do to instruction. You know what I'm saying? So you tell a story about, when I was a lieutenant, I lost the radio when we went to Lumpford. That story, they always loved that radio, but one of the local guys coming back and finding it for us. But because they can put themselves in your shoes, they can imagine riding the front seat, being a lieutenant on duty one day when one of you guys loses a radio, or whatever all the other situations are that we go through. And they're all real stories, so wonderfully, conveniently, they're interesting, and most of them are pretty funny when you tell them as a story. They weren't very funny when they were happening. But
every bullet point in our presentation, the PowerPoint presentation we do is just that's to help the students, not us. We know the stuff, but every bullet point has a different scenario. I think scenario based. I think talking about it and then going, okay, like when I do the 5-alarm leadership at the company officer academy, I do it's never the fault of the target to improve your aim, improve yourself, improve your aim, improve yourself, because we tend to blame the target instead of ourselves. And I talk about the lesson learned that I had a guy in my own company who couldn't read, and I didn't know it. And I gave him a hard time, and I'm like, why are you not? He's always failing tests on purpose. And I finally was chewing him out, and he's crying. He's 44 years old at the time, and he's like, for a grown adult to tell you that they can't read. And I had to change my whole technique. I started doing oral exams with him, and he was passing everything. But I missed that. So every one of those stories has some of our successes, but some of our failures, or we stepped on stuff. But so the Company Officer Academy was developed out of just requests for people to go, look, I need something to go to school. We did all stuff for firefighters. We're really not doing anything with company officers. And then we got more and more required. Started several years back, like New Hampshire, for a Chief Officer Academy.
Right. Well, I mean, and conveniently or inconveniently, whatever the fact may be, a lot of places don't train their company officers. They just promote people. They just either do a test process or whatever it might be, whatever the function is to be promoted. They do it. They come up with a list of them. They make a group of selections, and they hand them a new badge and a new colored shirt. They give them maybe a new assignment to go somewhere new, and no training, no education, no anything. And they depend on this guy having to learn from his officers that he was growing up with, which I'm sure he did. Unfortunately, the officers that he worked with weren't so sharp and were doing things backwards. Now we get two guys doing things backwards because he learned it from a guy that wasn't doing it right. And now we get two guys that do it that way. Rather than say, okay, you're a lieutenant now, you're a captain now, whatever the rank might be, we're going to give you some established fire department training, and here's how we want you to do things. And like you just said, today's class was a culmination of
same thing, but for chiefs.
Exactly.
That can be right. They come up and say, Chief Salka, all right, great, we're doing this. Some of the guys and gals that we had for the Company Officer Academy early on are the ones go, okay, you need to do the same thing now that I'm getting ready to promote a battalion chief. Right. Because I thought at first I was at a disadvantage because there wasn't much for company officer. Now I've been doing that for 5, 6 years, 7 years, and I'm getting ready to get promoted. And there's nothing for a shift chief. There's nothing,
And few people do what the FDNY does, which is first line supervisors training, 6 weeks for lieutenant, a month. Captain's command class is a month long. Battalion chief command course is a month long. All 3 of those ranks, you get promoted to those. You are off the line. You are in training 5 days a week for 6 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on what rank you get promoted to. And it's wonderful. And it takes you a long time to digest that stuff and to start developing new habits and, a new way about yourself and making lieutenant from firefighter or making a battalion chief from company officer. Absolutely.
Oh, and today we laid it out for them and kind of just walked them through kind of walking into the firehouse in the morning, even for the volunteers, meeting night, or you get for whatever, for drill night, you walk in there, okay, what's the first thing you need to take care of? And that's everything from getting yourself ready and getting dialed in to checking your manpower, to make sure all your company officers are in place, so they got all their people in place, to make sure you got all the chiefs next to you, and like we talked about, for a lot of the smaller departments that don't have multiple, we had a bunch in class today with multiple battalion chiefs on duty, but we had a lot more that didn't. That, like I know where I come from, we've got, the battalion chief and his aide, another one on ship, but I was always asking, who are the duty chiefs around me? Who's going to come in automatic or mutual aid and has my back? The same thing for us. So, knowing who you got around you and who's coming in behind you, especially as a boss. We talk about, we're going to be doing our Mayday class, we'll talk about that in a little bit. We never have enough people there. We never have bosses there when a Mayday drops. And we're notorious for that. Well, if you don't know who they are ahead of time, how you can even call? I mean, who doesn't want to go to a fire? If you don't want to go to a fire, trade in your firefighting card, right?
And you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. I forget where I heard that, but somebody created that phrase, and I picked it up. I repeat it anytime I can. If you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. And talk about the fire service. Talk about a motto that you can live by. That's great for us.
Well, we talked about the firehouse routine, and then we talked about knowing your response area.
Right.
Well, because I think a lot of the higher up you go, the less time they spend out there. It's like now they get buried up either with paperwork or some places, or it's easy to get sewn in behind a desk.
Especially these guys and gals, chiefs that don't have an aide, that don't have someone else in the office to help them, or someone else in the car to help them, or someone on the scene to help them. My whole career as a chief, 17 years in the FDNY, I had battalion aide. I had a good senior firefighter that knew what he was doing. That was so good on the computer, so good on the radio. He could do fire reports when we got back, and I didn't have to do that. I said, you know what? We're going to run over to 80. Let's go. Let me finish the report, chief. Okay, go ahead. Finish the report. He gets stuck. Boom, out the door we go. Now, If I was doing all the reports, if I was doing all the driving, if I was doing all the rate checking, if I didn't have an aide, that would eat up a lot of my time during the day. And I'd be less able to get out in the field and visit people and drive by and do building familiarization and stop by, 48 and see the new lieutenant there.
Well, you talked earlier today in class about knowing your response areas as a battalion, just like you should as a company officer and even as firefighters. The call should come in, everybody should be going, I know where that building's at. That's at the corner of walk and don't walk and all this stuff, so on and so forth. I know you've heard me mention Eddie Enright, Chief Eddie Enright. Eddie Enright is just, he's one of those guys I wish I could have worked for. He retired as a deputy district chief in Chicago, battalion chief of the 3rd Battalion, captain on Engine 98 with his dad and grandpa down there next to the Hancock building, high-rise guru, old SS1, Snorkel Squad 1 guy. What an incredible leader. We'd be in the 3rd Battalion, John. I think I've told you, we're on Chicago Avenue, and he'll pull over, and no rotators out or nothing, a right-hand lane, because people will just drive around because it's fire department. He'll go, Rick, third, three-story frame, third one on the block there, fire, top side and the back, how much hose you need? We're in the middle of the street. I'm like, okay, well, I know I'm going to need about 50 feet to the front door to get there. I'm going to need one roughly per landing to get this. He goes, can you get it with the crosshair? We have to pull this skid line out the back. And buildings, and he was another one that would just go, I know that building and where we're going. We'd be en route, and he'd be describing the building to me as a chief, and the whole thinking, how can you efficiently run a fire or a job if you pull up and go, wow, look at this place.
Wow, I never noticed this building.
I never thought that if it got, you should be saying, if we get a fire, I hope it didn't get in this part. If it does, I'm going to do this as soon as I get there. And what's it? Tommy O'Donnell from Chicago. Ray said, I'm going to request a second. In about 5 more minutes, give me a third. And I'm probably going to go to a fourth. Mac did that. Jack McCassin did that once. What he called, if you don't know your buildings, and now, we talked about that. We talked about John, and talk about this for our listeners, our viewers, the importance of getting out to your companies as a battalion chief and visiting. Just making, we asked the question, do you announce your company or do you not announce your company? What is it?
We did talk about that this morning. And Nicole from San Francisco was there. She was a battalion chief for a while.
Nicole started with us here, coming to class with us when she was a lieutenant, and then made captain, and then maybe battalion chief. Now she's assistant chief
in San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Comes to a lot of our classes, and she tells us that. I love when you guys are teaching. I jump in, whether it's a new class or an old class. And we asked her this morning the same question. She said that in San Francisco, battalion chiefs are required pretty much to visit each quarters, each company, one time per shift. She didn't say shift. She said something else. But it was the equivalent of a shift in New York. And New York City's the same way. You work in a day tour, a night tour, a 24-hour shift, or whatever you're working. You pretty much gotta get out of the chair and get out to your firehouses one time during the day or the evening, whatever it is. Come back around during drill time, after dinner for a cup of coffee, whatever it might be. They're not very particular about the nature of the visit or the length of the visit even. But they want you to get out there. They want you to take time and be in every firehouse, exchange information with some guys. Let the guys see you, and you can see the guys, and you can see the rigs, and see what's going on. And I always enjoyed it. I always enjoyed getting out and visiting the firehouse.
Could you tell when you walked in a firehouse if there was something going on?
Pretty much. Sometimes if you stop during the day when things
what I mean. We talk about
something. You can hear if there were some issues going on, maybe in the kitchen or in the back of the apparatus.
How involved did you get? Huh? How involved?
I didn't get involved at all, because if somebody wants to be involved, they'll call me. I had a great crew of captains and lieutenants. I had 6 captains, 3 engines, 3 trucks, company commanders in the FDNY, and they're wonderful people, a lot of experience that had time as lieutenants, time as firefighters in all busy places. Pretty much a battalion that attracted people that knew what they were doing, that had a good handle on the job. Not only had a good handle on the job in the field, but a good handle on the job in the firehouse. They know how to break firefighters in. They know how to get the job done properly with the people that were there. So if a captain or a lieutenant were having issues with a firefighter, or a captain was having issues with a lieutenant, or a firefighter was having issues with a captain,
about face?
Absolutely. If I happen to stumble into something where I heard something was going on, or somebody said, "Hey, chief, why don't you wait out here? The captain's in the back doing a little exercise with one of the men," I knew what that meant. I meant, you know what? Tell the captain I stopped by and I'll see him later. I'll give him a call later.
I remember our central station, Louis. I remember walking over for coffee, walking in. I went like this. I even leaned forward so I could make the turn to go right back.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to avoid doing my job, and I'm not trying to run away from issues that are going on. I'm trying to let captains do their job.
What are you doing to the captain when you constantly insert yourself into what they no longer, they just.
You and I say this all the time. We say this all the time. We remember where you came from. And I remember being a captain. The last thing in the world I wanted to see when I was a captain, handling an issue with one of my men or one of my firefighters, was the last thing in the world I wanted to see was Chief DiDonato come bubbling into the firehouse. Hey, Cap, how you doing? Not so good. Not so good right now, Chief. You know, but most chiefs know what to do. They know when to make themselves scarce. And I learned it from the best. I learned it from some great chiefs when I was a captain, when I was a lieutenant. I learned some good, not moves, but good times to exit stage left. And it was always a benefit. There was always a positive result to not being there when things were going on that the captain or the lieutenant were trying to handle. And by far, you know, some people say, well, what are they trying to hide it? Absolutely not trying to hide it. They were trying to do their job. And lieutenants and captains are company officers, and they're supposed to.
And later on, two things happen. A lot of times they call you or they see you at a job and they go, hey, Chief, got a second? Look, I know I saw you come in, but thanks for, you know, I just want to let you know this is what's going on. You know, we had a deal. It's the third time he's been late, and I'm just doing some counseling, and I just didn't. And then part two of that is I appreciate you giving me a chance to work with my guys, because they do. They appreciate the empowerment. Letting them. We talked. The word empowerment was up at class day. You know, there's so many different ways you go with that. And one is empowering your company officers to do their jobs.
To do their job.
Yeah. And now roll the film backwards for a little bit. That really doesn't happen as well if you don't sit down with your company officers or your new company officers and say, look, this is how things work in the 18th battalion or my fire department.
Expectations.
And how many places do we go where guys and gals go, I got a great department chief. Don't get me wrong. I love working with great people, but they just kind of promoted me, and
Ready to the wolves.
Thank God I had a good captain before that, because I can't imagine if I worked for like this guy over here that doesn't do anything with people, because I'd be guessing right now.
And most firefighters are pretty receptive to new bosses coming in and being a little light on their feet and not quite being sure exactly what to do, maybe in a new environment or with a new crew, different people. Once you get familiar with the people that you work with regularly, you know what to expect. They know what to expect. Everybody's pretty fat and happy. And then you get promoted. Now you have some new responsibilities, some elevated responsibilities, and with different people. And you're not quite sure how they're going to receive what you're trying to say or what you're trying to get done. So, everybody's a little, like I said, a little bit light on their feet when they first meet. But once they get broken in, spend a couple of years in rank, get a permanent assignment somewhere, get to know your people, and they get to know you, and things work out just fine.
I know we've said this in class. You can walk into a firehouse and you can tell how we talk about the tactical readiness of a unit is pretty identifiable when it comes to who's running the show. You can walk into a firehouse and you can tell by looking, right? We talked about this. Remember Benny Crane? I talked about the Benny Crane story. Another great mentor. Chief Benny Crane was a district chief in Chicago for 36 years. Incredible fire-ground commander. Very, very smart man. Taught Stephen Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Could run a fire like there's no tomorrow. Benny used to say, and you've heard me say this umpteen times before, I used to try, if I was coming to teach somewhere, I'd get there a whole day early just to kind of, all right, see who I'm dealing with here in Titusville, whatever, just to see if, hey, how you doing? I'm nothing, I'm just a visiting firefighter, just to kind of see if I'm dealing with real firefighters or the pretend ones. And we're going to go do a class about almost 2 hours outside the city. And at 6 o'clock at night, and then the live burn team, we're going to do the burn tomorrow, the house burn for training. And I want to leave at 6 in the morning. And he's like, what do we want to leave so early for? I said, well, Chief, I want to get there to see what these guys. He goes, no, just get there about 10 minutes early. How many times you already told us? Get there about 10 minutes earlier than you normally do. And I go, but Chief, how am I going to know if I'm dealing with the real thing? Because there's a lot of pretend firefighters. They got the baseball hats and the shirts and all the stuff, but they're pretend firefighters. He goes, this is what you do. You walk into the firehouse, walk into the apparatus bay, stop, take a smell. Does it smell like a firehouse? He goes, and you'll know what I mean by smell. He goes, walk over to the pumper. Is it filthy? Are the tools rusted? He says, look at the hose bed. How are the hose beds finished? Does it look like the pumper threw up its hose? Look at we got buddies in Detroit that run fires all the time. Their hose beds are better packed. There's some guys that run like a fire a year. He said, open one and only one compartment. That'll tell you about the rest of the rig. He says, if it's a volley joint, volunteers go to their turnout gear racks because they tell you all about their personalities at their gear racks. It's a career place, or this part goes, walk over to the officer seat, not the firefighter. Look and see how he or she's got the cab organized. He said, You wouldn't believe this, but there's cabin lieutenants that in the morning they just jump in the cab and think everything's just going to match, but they don't organize the cab. They're a little office space on the road. He goes, look at their air pack straps, look at their coats, and do they have their radio hanging on their coats? This is
got the shoulder strap just upright and everything.
Back in the 80s, he was talking about putting the radio under your coat.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And then look at their bunker pants on the floor. They're turned on the suspenders. How they have them rolled down? Do they have their Nomex hood pulled through their bootstrap? I go, what? What are you talking about? He goes, where do you keep your Nomex hood? I said, I pull through my bootstrap. He goes, why? Because so I don't forget it. It's there. He goes, again, take a smell. Does it smell like a firehouse? And you know what I'm talking about. He goes, I'm not talking about walking around a white glove. He goes, does it smell like a firehouse? He goes, then sneak in. They could be in the kitchen talking fishing shows or NASCAR, but you know they have their shit together. And he has been right as rain. In fact, you and I talk about it's hard to walk into a firehouse and not take a look at the rig. And that could change tomorrow. Totally different because a whole different company officer could come in and change things up.
But you're right. When you walk into a firehouse, like you said, whether it's taking a smell or taking a quick walk around a rig or looking at the tools, it's like they posted a sign. It's like there's a sign hanging on the front of the rig. We're ready.
I like that.
It's so obvious, right? You're looking at the rig. You just take a quick glance and look around the place and say, man, without even taking 5 more steps, this place is squared away. This place is sharp. And everything else will back that up as you walk through the rest of the firehouse. It's not like you're going to be surprised. They don't polish up the rig and the apparatus floor, and the rest of the place is falling down. Absolutely not.
You look at their tools, and you look at their tools for like an engine. You look at their hose beds, how their hose beds are finished, the cap, everything they carry, what they do.
How about that with the hose beds? Well, you know what? This is Chicago. This is the Bronx. This is downtown LA. We're pretty busy. We stretch hose a lot. I mean, that's why the hose is a pack right. I said, wait a minute. If you stretch hose a lot, there's 5 more chances for you to pack the hose right. The places that stretches hose once a month, they're the ones I understand having a crappy hose bed because they packed it and it's been like that for 3 weeks. If you go out a couple of times a day and pull hose, there's your third opportunity to pack it right. Those are the guys that pack it right. The guys that are packing it all day, for sure.
Well, we talked about response capabilities, and I liked how you ended up with the program differentiating between when we talked about de-escalation. De-escalation, like the first one was the scene, and then we got to the fire service, and then we got to it was just kind of like
right.
And a
couple of different elements.
It wasn't just all deal. It was like, okay, what do we have to deal with first? So you got your fire, you've been running your fire. And guys, we're seeing the end now. It's coming to an end, and we know. What's the first thing like we talked about? What's the first thing we should be thinking about when we're in a job when it comes to the
Well, I mean, when I used to put a fire under control, if the deputy had gone, reverted command back to me, first thing I would do is start getting rid of my surplus resources, get rid of my extra engines and trucks that came in that I had maybe standing by or
kind of like the extras.
Yeah. Get rid of the folks that hadn't done a single thing. Now, but before I did that, I was to make sure there's not some last minute work that's got to get done on the scene. A hot day or a cold day or a really long job. Maybe the guys and gals that are there really tired. I might be able to use some of the reserve companies and put them to work. Pulling hose, taking up hose, draining hose, packing hose, and stuff like that. If not, I cut them loose and get them back to their stations, or maybe even cut them loose and get back to the dispatcher. In my job, the dispatcher will fill places in with them if he needs it. If you don't have that situation, you can do it yourself. Hey, Engine 2 from Woodsboro, can you do me a favor? We go back to Bliss, head back to our Station 1 and sit there for about an hour before we get back, just so you can cover downtown first until we get back. And so obviously, you get rid of your resources.
And the majority of the time, you ask those guys, what do they say?
Happy to do it. Whatever you need, Chief. Listen, most firefighters are very happy to go to work. Most firefighters are very happy to work at fires once they are at work, or go and stand by, or go and pick up hose. Most guys are happy to leave the firehouse and go do something. So they'll be just as happy going and sitting in a firehouse and covering something for you, or going and packing hose somewhere else for you as well.
And it was we got those. We got the extras pushed back, release them or to cover, and then we go after who?
Then I always jump to the first 2 companies, first 2 engine, first 2 truck.
Because they took a whooping.
And then the longest had the toughest fight that day. That they're the most worn out and everything else. I cut them loose. Sometimes we bring them back to the firehouse in a van because their rig is still there hooked up and might be somebody else washing down, maybe a relief company or the second relief company. And sometimes they get disconnected and just take up and go and get everybody out of it as soon as possible. A lot of folks in the fire service have trouble winding things down. Everybody has no problem escalating things. Transmit a second alarm, give me another engine, mutual aid, 2 more engines, standby companies. But then when the fire's out, sometimes people are sort of like unsure what to do. What do we do now? Well, the fire's out. You can stop by taking the hose lines out and draining them, putting them back on the rigs, and let's start driving these fire trucks away from here. Now, obviously, there's some other folks that we have to take care of. And as we all know, Ellen Bruder Sr. was very famous in introducing us to Mrs. Smith. And there she is, sitting on the curb or sitting in a car out in the driveway or maybe at the neighbor's house. Now she's got something. Now she's got some needs that we're going to have to take care of. And of course, the fire service is much more responsive to that now than we used to be. In my early days in the job as a firefighter, even as lieutenant, I remember getting in the ring and driving away. Now, maybe there was a chief there that was taking care of some stuff that I wasn't aware of, but taking care of the people that were left was no concern to me when I was a young officer. It was just like taking care of my guys, putting the fire out, getting back in service, getting ready for the next job. We have some responsibilities beyond the tactical end of our job. We have some responsibilities to the citizens and to the people who just suffered the loss or had the flooding condition.
A lot of company officers that they just, I'm out of here, but the chiefs now.
And that's what we brought that up today.
Here's a whole other level of, we got a family sitting here. This is the most traumatic thing that's ever happened. God forbid they even lost someone or a pet. This is just incredible what's going through it. I know people, John, that when we do our after the fire stuff, that still have the toothbrush that we gave them. So they had nothing else. They had everything was burned up, and they kept it. It's in a shoebox with specials. They go, little kids, a little teddy bear, the stuff. I mean, just they're like, this is all I had. I went from having all this to have.
I mean, life goes on, even at our biggest operations, even on our most, I don't want to call them tragic, because tragic is when somebody dies or gets really hurt, but even at big fires where people lose everything that they had, 3-story apartment house or a big private dwelling, there's a need that follows the fire,
Well, and I think, we've gotten better over the years at clearing up the highways. We're on the interstates and highways for accidents. We used to really bundle them up for a long time. I know by us, like helicopters, all kind of stuff. And then we started moving towards, okay, guys, we got to pick this up. Okay, let's go. We got to open up this. We got people that get to work, got this going on. I'm not thinking we have to do that as quick at a fire, but you're right. I think, after a while, you go, guys, come on. I know, and sometimes you look at guys who are rehabbing, okay, guys, I hate to do this, but who's ready to go? We got to start packing hose.
When it's over, it's over.
And this is where it's important where before maybe some of those fresh companies either leave, or like we've said, in the heat or freezing cold, you're like, my toes are gone, and then you see these guys come down, they're all toasty, no ice, and like, hey, 3:30 in the morning, you just woke us up, come help you pick up your fire.
And I used to do it. And I'd be cold too, but I was there as long as the firefighters were there, and maybe outside and a little less physically active than they were. I might even be colder standing out at the command post. Deputy came, took the fire, then left and gave it back to me. So I'm still there. Obviously, I'm not going to get relief as a battalion chief, but also I got 2 or 3 reserve companies or extra companies coming in, and also I realized, okay, 72, relief 45, 89, relief 48. That's all we're doing. There's no discussion. There's no like, you guys have to relieve somebody. It's the same as telling them to stretch a line at the height of a fire. Just another assignment.
Well, and if you don't tell them, I was thinking about today when we were talking about it, I'm going, if you don't tell them, guys, let's pick up and go, that's like saying, hey, 45, you guys ready to come out, go to rehab or go? What are they going to tell you? Right. No, I'm good, Chief.
I told guys years ago, those are not questions. If you ask company officers a question, you guys need relief? The answer is no, we don't need relief.
We're good.
That's just the way we are.
Give us another 5, Chief.
Right.
Give us another 5, Chief.
And they're not. And I've been through that. I've had that discussion with company officers. Tell them, number one, I don't ask anymore. I just instruct them. 48, 1 8 to 4 8. Go ahead, Chief. 88's on our way up to relieve you. You know what they say? 10-4. That's it. Now, a couple of times I've had situations where I send somebody up to relieve somebody, and 10 minutes later, deputy comes in, or 10 minutes later, deputy says, okay, it's slowing down now. Why don't you go upstairs and take a look around? Tell me what's going on. Sure, Chief. And now I walk upstairs, and the company that I sent in to relieve the company that was fighting the fire is sort of malingering out in the hallway. Hey, Lou, what are you doing out here? Oh, Chief, what are you doing up here? I just came up to see what's going on, see how things look. It looks pretty good, but I thought I sent you up here to relieve the first 2 inches. Well, what? Well, they really didn't need relief. I don't think I asked you if they needed relief. I think I asked you to come up here and relieve them. Where are they? Still in there? Yeah. And I go in there and shout the company number. Hey, come here. What's up, Lou? Oh, how you doing, Chief? I said, I'm not doing real well. I said, somebody had to relieve you 15 minutes ago, and you're still working, and they're out in the hallway getting their feet wet. What's going on? Well, we didn't really need it, and I have to explain to that officer the same story again. This really wasn't a question. It wasn't a quiz. I really instructed them to come up to relieve you because I wanted you to come down. I wanted to give them a little time in the fire department as well. But I got a probie. I'm trying to show them, listen, you told me to the wrong guy. They got a probie as well. I had this all planned out already. Please just do what you're told. Makes life a lot easier for us.
Wouldn't it be if we just like followed orders and we did our job?
I wasn't nasty. The guy wasn't in trouble. I wasn't being rude or anything. I was pretty short with him. I told him, just do what I asked you to do, and things will work much better here, And That was part of the stuff that we taught today at the class. That you know, sometimes you got to remind them, hey, did you notice these? That's what they're paying me for, to try and get this job done today. So let's just roll with the flow here and do what I say, and things will be a lot smoother.
Well, I wanted to ask you a couple more things about the last couple sections of the class, but remind our folks that are with us, we're live, and after this will be like something archived you can pull up. But we're live from Indianapolis, FDIC International. About 35,000 firefighters made it this week. I want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank them for today's show. 3M Scott and Fire and Safety is a proud sponsor of Fire Engineering's Talk Radio, the Trusted Voices. So thank you, 3M, for. I was always very proud to have 3M in my Still district in Bedford Park.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I was always very, very proud to have 3M products in my toolbox and all the other things that they make.
Another great group of people. They take care of the fire service, let me tell you. But last couple of things with that class, with the chief officers, field chief officers training program. We talked towards the end about training, and that kind of led us into mentoring, which got us into dealing with superiors. Which I think we've talked enough about training. We've talked enough about even mentoring, how important mentoring is. We're big believers in mentoring. But even so, to finish these off with, how important is to realize everybody's got a boss. Whether you like them or not, it doesn't matter. They're still the boss. You don't have to respect them, but you have to respect the rank. And that's but their loyalties are to their men and women, but their loyalties are to the team when it comes to admin. And without that nucleus, that brain trust being together, you're going to have problems. You're going to have morale. Things are not going to go right. You're going to find yourself kind of. And I actually had it happen as a chief, where I had an assistant chief that was horribly not loyal. You met Daryl and Tim; they were phenomenal. But I don't know, just the guys all thought he was, oh, what a great guy. He was just not loyal. Okay, and it just made it difficult to run things. It made it difficult to talk openly in meetings, and to know we had the trust and the blind faith of, look, if I had to come here and say, look, it's just a city hall, city manager wants this done. We're going to do this and this way and change this around. And it was time for guys to ask, they asked me, hey, Chief, where's this coming from? Well, we had a civilian call, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Well, like you and I have talked about, we don't have the time to explain every single order. Sometimes the guys just have to go, all right, boss, we're good to go. Why?
Is that so hard? And I try to explain to guys, that's why they call it the chain of command, right? It's the chain of command. Every link is just one. All you got to do is cut one link and the whole chain falls down. So when a assistant chief calls the borough commander calls the division calls me. John, yeah, it's Ray over here, Division 7. Hey, what's up, Chief? And I always call him Chief. One rank above me, I always call him Chief. They could have been below me. They could have been captains. They got promoted to my rank and then past me. I call him Chief. What's up, Chief? Listen, they said they want that stuff enacted today. All the new gear's got to be put on today. Old gear comes off, new gear goes on. You got it. Now, that might have even been an issue that I didn't really agree with. And I've been to plenty of division conferences and other kind of meetings where I voiced my opinion. And it was sometimes contrary to the direction that the conversation was going. But nonetheless, I still voiced my opinion, as others did, for and against different issues. And then once a decision was made, like Paul Powell said, that he welcomes disagreement. He welcomes discussion on different stuff like that.
The debate stimulates.
Right, stimulating debate. But once a decision is made, I expect you to back that decision up and enforce that decision and enforce those rules like they were your very own. And I tell guys the exact same thing. I said, once you've decided to study and take a test or a promotion or an interview or whatever the process is to move up through the ranks in your fire department, once you decide to walk away from one position, change helmets, change shirts, change collar pins, you're now part of a different club. You're part of that chain of command. The bottom of the chain of command is the firefighters, the worker bees, the guys and gals that do most of the work for us. But once you get to lieutenant, captain, battalion chief, and so on, all the way up the line, you occupy an important link in the chain. And when the orders come down, they flow down. And you are obligated to transmit them down and to explain as best as you can within reason to folks. Everybody doesn't always ask. I must say that the newer, younger generation asks why more frequently than some older generations or past generations did. All understandable, and sometimes you can explain it, and sometimes you can't. The hazard of getting too used to explaining things before they do it is tonight at 2 o'clock in the morning at the scene of a fire, I might give you an instruction, I might give you an order or a direction that I do not have time. I don't have the time or the inclination to explain.
You're training them to actually do that.
Exactly. And that's why we call people by their rank, even in the firehouse. Well, you call people captain and lieutenant at the lunch table? Yes, I'll call people captain and lieutenant at the lunch table, at the dinner table, on a paddleball court, or at the scene of a fire. Because what do you pick different times of day to address people differently? You call them Tom in the kitchen, but then an hour later when you're out on the street, you call them lieutenant. I said, I think you're going to fall into the wrong thing, or you're going to misspeak someday, and you're going to suddenly have it. You're not going to have the proper way of talking to somebody as an officer.
The lines get blurry. And I tell a story when we're together, even when we're teaching apart, that all the years I've known you, we've been very, very good friends, best of friends since like 1996, and we were teaching here forever. I've been in your firehouses umpteen times. I have never in your firehouse called you John. Now, in the office, just you and I. Right. But in front of you, I've never worked for you. I call you chief. I never worked for you. And people are like, well, I said, no, I just, there are certain people, oh my God, I could never imagine calling some of these guys, I just, oh God, I get up, I can't, it makes me sweat. I'd be so with EJ, I could never ever not call them by their rank. I would feel so uncomfortable.
And I have guys that tell me, I go to the division, and Jay Jonas, perfect example. One of my best friends, Jay Jonas, is now a deputy chief, was my boss my last night that I worked. And like if I'm sitting in the office with him, it's Jay and it's John. But if I see him on the apparatus law, how you doing, chief? And I've had guys say, you don't have to call me chief, you can call me Tom. I know your name is Tom, but today we're at work, we're in uniform, we're in the firehouse, you're the chief. You're the chief, I'm the chief. My officers call me chief. Sometimes I go to Home Depot off duty. I'm with my wife at Home Depot picking out something for the house. And all of a sudden, I'll meet a guy and his wife, and they're doing them. Hey, Chief Salter, how you doing? Hey, Tommy, how are you? Good, good. This is my wife, Sue. Hi, Sue, how are you? Sue, this is my guy, Chief Salter, the guy that I work under at the firehouse. Here he is, introducing me as Chief Salter in Home Depot, and I'm there in my jeans and polo shirt with my wife, because he's just so used to doing that. And it's not a power thing. It's a respect for the rap thing.
Well, in the movie, we're both movie buffs, but the movie The American President, Michael Douglas. Is it Martin? Who's the older Sheen? Martin? The old man?
I don't care for any of them. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, Mark. So there's a point in there where they're together, and he answers them by Mr. President, and Michael Douglas will look. You were the best man at my wedding. Blah 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 blah. We're together. We're playing pool. Can't you call me? Blah blah. He says, sure. So he says the lines. I'm not exactly right. He's like, absolutely, Mr. President. And he goes, no. He goes, I will not say your name and this. And it was just kind of like, and the way he says, I'm like, that's a great line about, just, and here's the thing that a lot of folks that say, yeah, but we're all buddies or we get along, we don't do it. The problem, we've said this in class a bunch of times, is now you have to sit down with Rick and go, Rick, come here, man. The hell was that on the call? What are we talking about? No, we don't do that.
Come on, Bill.
We're at a slip.
Come on, Bill.
Now, when we leave, and they go, what was Chief Salter talking about? Now it's, freaking John. It's not the chief or lieutenant. You know what I'm saying? It's a personal name thing instead of.
Right. It blurs the lines. It's just so easy to fall into the structure and to work within the structure while you're at work, while you're on duty, while you're at operations, while you're in the firehouse. It's just so easy to just. And I talk about it all the time, to just conform to the structure while we're here. You want to go play softball on the side, call people Tommy and you nitwit and whatever else you want to do, that's fine. You want to be on duty? Here's how we do things when we're on duty. It's just so simple. I don't know. I never quite understood the resistance to it.
I don't know. I think that makes sense. But again, packed classroom, and that's going to be an 8-hour day. We've got so much. We had to cherry pick for the 4 hours today. We went 10 minutes past. And the last part was a little rushed. We covered everything, but just because there's
we're going to spend another 15 minutes on each of those last 3 subjects.
And as great as it is, had a big room packed like that. We had a big room packed. we were very big into audience participation, asking questions. Sometimes it's and generating.
And that slows things down. When we're walking up and down the aisle saying, what about you? You had your hand raised.
Especially in a big room, because there's so many people. Smaller, you get a couple of hands and you keep it going. But so it's a great thing, but it's kind of not making excuses. We kind of push, but
great. The audience participation is absolutely valuable to the content of the class, because suddenly you get stuff from the field, meaning from out there in the audience, from a guy you're like, wow, nobody ever said that before. That's a pretty interesting.
We've written stuff down before.
Yes, we sure have. Yes, we sure have.
Well, we did that today. We're doing the show now, and then tomorrow's opening ceremonies. And then we're doing the book booth. We're in the book booth almost all week.
Book booth.
Thursday afternoon.
Bunch of engine company books there. They ran out last year. They ordered more this year.
They flew them in by private jet last year.
Self-service there.
But then tomorrow or Thursday afternoon, we'll go with Chief Hall with Bobby. We're shaking challenges, and if you're here, come on by, because I think it's going to get a little fired up. We really don't have a script, but there's things we know we want to talk about. Yeah, get off our chest, which is pretty cool. Then Friday morning, we're doing
3 Degrees of Mayday.
Yes, and
another brand new program, first time.
Both you and I have done the Mayday. I mean, I'll just say it. We could say it without sound, but instrumental. You would get all right. We're saving our own, bringing awareness to that whole firefighter safety and survival thing when nobody else was doing it. Nobody else was doing it. There was no Ritter Mayday. People laughed at us about that stuff and so on and so forth. And to be, because that's it. Maydays, hope to God you never have to have one your entire career. Some guys go forever without even being anywhere close to one. It will be the most stressful, most difficult, most trying thing you've ever run. And we don't spend as much time. We've done the managing and Mayday for a long time, but really going, okay, this is how you work a Mayday. This is like, we've done like managing a Mayday that Skip and I used to do. We talk about this is what's going through the trapped firefighter's mind. This is what's going through the command's mind. This will go to the rescue's mind. The mutineers, the guys that say, I'm waiting, I'm going to do all the different things and so on and so forth. And we do that. And then we do like trap, now what? All right, you've been doing your trap. How you prepare for it? You do get out alive, all these things, but what we've never done that we're doing Friday,
right? And
separate the three.
And what most Mayday classes are, the perspective is usually from the firefighter that's in trouble or the officer that's reporting another firefighter in trouble or missing or down. It's usually focused on that perspective, coming from the Mayday deliverer, the guy or gal that's delivering the Mayday out in Clovelly. What we do with the 3 Degrees of Mayday is we've changed the perspective to the receiver, to the incident commander, the chief officer. Again, we had a chief officer class today, so this is tied into that. But it's the chief officer that's receiving the Mayday, what he can expect to receive, or maybe, versus some of the expectations that people have from what's already been written, from already established procedures and guidelines that are out there, whether it be lunar, whether it be who, what, where, and we know what we like and what we don't like, and changing channels. What we're talking about is the perspective from the chief. How do you receive it? I even wrote an article recently about receiving the Mayday properly is as important as the folks that are transmitting the Mayday properly. So you got to be able to receive it. You got to be able to receive it and interpret it if it's not delivered in the format that you expect. Sometimes people train on Mayday. They know that here's what I'm supposed to do. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. You know what the Mayday? Go ahead. This is latitude on the second floor. I got a man down. On 10th floor latitude. Are you by yourself? Do you have more? And that's how they train. Works out perfect. Well, because nobody's tail is really on fire that day. Well, now you go to a real fire and that happens, and now the guy is really panicking. He doesn't do Mayday, Mayday, Mayday and wait for you to acknowledge. He shouts, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. I'm missing my Kobe. It's getting hot up here. And suddenly this thing it's out of sync. It's out of format. Wait a minute. That's not the Mayday format.
Like that,
right. Because now we're trained in a certain format, and now we're outside the format. Well, guess what? You better be able to modify. You better be able to innovate. You better be able to handle stuff that's happening that's not the way you practiced it. Because you got the white shirt on, Bubba. You want to be outside? You want to be in charge? You want to be the IC? Want to get the white helmet on? You better be able to handle whatever they throw at you. And you got to know that what's happening is not just a fire, as ridiculous as that may sound, because fires are pretty dangerous operations. But now it's a Mayday. Now it's maybe a firefighter in trouble. Maybe somebody's going to be seriously injured or killed. So that perspective is different. We talked today about it when we talked to the chiefs about the chief's responsibilities, and Friday when we talk about the 3 Degrees of Mayday, we're going to talk about the three different sort of realms, the three different sort of response patterns that you can develop to three different general levels of maydays. You have a single mayday, meaning a mayday for a single firefighter in trouble or out of air, or, you know, his whole, you know, his boot goes through the floor and he's sort of stuck in a hole and he's injured. That's a mayday, but it's relatively low-level mayday. So one firefighter in trouble, one firefighter lost, and we're going to have to get maybe one team of people in with a couple of tools and maybe handle it. Then you get maybe the larger incident where 2 or 3 firefighters are fighting a fire and a big piece of ceiling comes down and knocks one guy unconscious, burns the other guy, and the other guy's tangled up in it. Now that's a mayday for
That was the announcement, how you can't get to the hose.
Right. So now we got a line shut down, a burst mic, one guy screaming that he's being burned, another guy unconscious, smoke. Now we have a more serious situation. It's still mayday, mayday, mayday. It's still engine 26. I'm on the second floor, ceiling fell down, and with the 3 of us are injured. But now the chief better be able to respond to put together a better response to that, because he can't just send in a 2-person team like he did for the one missing firefighter. He might have to send in a 4 or 5-person team, or 2 3-person teams.
And back that up and back that up.
That's right. And have not 1 RIP pack, but 2 RIP packs or 3 RIP packs, and a surge rope, and maybe, even though we might transmit another alarm for the single firefighter in trouble, we better get an enhanced EMS response now assignment there, because now we got 3 firefighters that are in.
Because, and we'll talk about this Friday, we are notorious, we've talked about this a bunch, we are notorious in the fire service for never bringing enough help. Or not, and now, part of that is, we talked about this, and we'll talk about again, the majority of the maydays occur in the first 24, 25 minutes of an incident. There are some later, but the majority, and it's in now take off your response times, you know, the time it takes your stretch line to get in there, they're on their first tank, which means they're at the end of their first tank, you know, and it's, we don't have 40 minutes, 45 minutes to fiddle with this. You know, they're trapped, they're on fire, they're out of air, they're lost, whatever, you gotta get them now. So that's one of the things, is that we gotta get people to realize, reality when it comes to maydays is we don't have an hour, 45 minutes to mess with this. The other thing is, the majority of maydays last 2 to 7 minutes. So that being said, we're notorious for not bringing up people there, okay? So we deal with the first one, we deal with the second one, we've got maybe a company jammed up, and then we've got the 3rd degree,
Catastrophic.
building collapse, something big, maybe all of a sudden,
Whole ceiling up to the whole top floor. We get 7 members trapped from 2 different companies in 2 different locations. That's catastrophic compared to 1 firefighter lost inside the first floor of a private lot. That's catastrophic. You probably don't have enough people on duty in most fire departments that day to help 7 people trapped on the top floor, or a building collapse with a half a dozen firefighters trapped in different voids on different floors because the whole building fell down. You're going to have other agencies coming in. You're going to have all sorts of special equipment coming in for stuff like that you would never consider, nor do you need at the single firefighter mayday at that private dwelling fire.
you better be thinking big all the time.
And not thinking big, but planning big.
Right.
Planning big, and you don't got to get ready if you stay ready. If you're always ready to do that, if you quickly recognize, what do we just have happen? Chief, I think the rear of the building just collapsed. Looks like we got 2 companies missing. Guess what? Now you know you're at a level 3. Now you know you're at a level 3 RIT operation, and and that's the kind of stuff you can have at the command post, because you've got that luxury of being at a command post with pages, books, sheets, codes that you can quickly pick up and say, this is definitely a level 3, Tommy. Start requesting all that information right there for me. Thanks, Chief. And now he can start requesting, heavy equipment and a 3rd alarm and 2 more rescue companies and another deputy chief or 4 more battalion chiefs for surveys. Stuff that you would never consider doing for a single firefighter trapped or in distress, but that you better be thinking about, not thinking about, have planned out for that catastrophic fire scene.
Well, and we got a few more things to talk about before we're done. We got like about 9 minutes or 8 minutes, but let's talk. You mentioned it, and I always ask you to talk about this when we do our shows or classes. So I brought up Lunar and who, what, where. And now I'm not a big fan of Lunar. I know you really don't like it, and we talk about that. I know John really doesn't like it. I'm not a big fan of it. The reason I won't say put up with it is because departments that train in that or anything, at least they're training their people to say something, because there's so many maydays where nobody says a word. However, it's just not a good acronym, because what?
I can't disagree with you more. And the reason I think Lunar is absolutely terrible, obscenely terrible, ridiculously level. I could go on and on, and you can't publish.
Like I said, I don't like the whole Lunar, but what I'm saying is,
I don't even like
training is at least it gets them to say something, but it doesn't. The Lunar part doesn't work.
Right. Well, that's the problem. And at least you get them to say something, but what they're saying is wrong and ineffective and misdirectional. It sets people off into the
Call for help as well.
If you don't train anybody to say Lunar, you know what they're gonna say? They're gonna call for help. They're gonna say who they are and what the problem is. You don't have to teach anybody how to do that. You don't have to teach a Boy Scout how to do that in the middle of the woods. Hey, help! This is Tommy. I'm lost in the woods. You don't have to train somebody to do that. But if you start training them in an acronym, LUNAR, location, unit, name, auxiliary appliances, resources needed.
And it leaves out what?
And it leaves out why he called the Mayday. Mayday means a life-threatening situation has developed that you want solved. You found an unconscious firefighter. You are running out of air and you're breathing toxic air. You have fallen through the floor and your legs on fire on the floor below. How do you give a Mayday? If you remember Luna, which is ridiculous that you have to remember 5 things. There's a guy outside waiting to hear if you're going to get it right. He could have Luna in front of him. He could be asking you that faster than you should be able to remember it when you're in distress. But the point is, even if you remember it, now it has to be a follow-up conversation. Okay, we got Luna, but why are you in trouble? Now the guy has to remember a second thing. It's just, you're almost guaranteed.
It's asked backwards because think about it and just ask yourself, to our viewers, how many times have you been truly lost, trapped inside a burning building, God forbid, but there's some that are out there, and we're making you do the whole alphabet. The guy outside with the shirt with the spotlights and the headset and the Crayola set and all the stuff, and
he's listening.
He's making you, right.
Yeah. Imagine that. Oh, we just got a Mayday, Tom. Listen up. Let's see if this guy gets it right. Now they're waiting to hear you recite Luna. I mean, think really about that. The most distressful situation, maybe in your existence, in your life, not even in your career. This might be the moment that you think, holy crap, I'm going to die here. And now we wait to see if you remembered the acronym, EIEIO. How ridiculous.
And that's why.
How ridiculous.
Who, what, where, right? First thing I'm on the second floor, I can't find my partner. I'm buzzing. I'm sucking my face piece against, and I can't find my way. If I'm going to call the Mayday, I'm saying Mayday, 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 and that's it. And that should tell everybody else to what?
To silence.
To shut up. And if not, then you as the chief tell everybody in a very nice way.
I got myself on a video. Not a video, on an audio tape from a fire that I was at, a good high-rise fire. Somebody gave a Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. I acknowledged it because the deputy was there, must not have heard it, and I acknowledged it. And then I got on the radio and said, everybody shut up, we got a Mayday. I actually had to say the words shut up on the radio, which is not conventional, nor is it normal.
But sometimes you got to jar people into, oh, wait a minute, right?
But the point was, nobody really responded to the Mayday because it was a pretty active operation still. And it just goes to show you how even a Mayday can sort of get lost in the sauce, never mind then requiring a guy to do a memory test, okay? So if you do the who, what, where, nobody forgets who they are.
So I called it Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
Right. You go ahead with the Mayday.
And then I tell you, when I do who, what, where, ladder 58, okay, ladder 58.
On the fire floor.
And I can't find my partner, I can't find my officer, I'm running along there.
Done.
Who, what, where?
And we tell everybody, if the incident commander needs to know more, guess what? He or she is the person outside the command
with the clipboard.
They can get on the radio. All right, a ladder 58. Are you by yourself? Or? Yeah, by myself. I'm missing my probie. How's your air? Hold on means I'm going to look now because I didn't look at that yet. Now he's going to look at his air or look at his heads up. Yeah, I'm good. I got about half. Okay, good. You're good on that. Calm down, Billy. Calm down. The team's on the way. Anybody on the second floor near ladder 11 or near ladder 58? Yeah, this is ladder 11, Chief. We heard the whole thing. We're on the way. Another reason not to change the channels. Jumps us over to the channel change issue. If you change channels, you isolate the RIT from whatever else is going on the scene. And those are the closest people, as we know by the.
And we're talking about that too Friday, but
absolutely.
But all those studies, even Don Abbott did a great study, which kind of backs up what we've been saying for a long time. But about the whole, and I know there's a lot of folks out there came out of a Chiefs conference about changing channels, but why would you separate? Why would you separate? The fire attack from the emergency, from the RIT, and all these people, they can't hear what's going on at the fire, they can't hear what's going on at the rescue. They could be in the room right next to you. And we're not allowed to talk on the radio. And now, here's the other thing people forget. This is the reality part of it. Can't you say everybody switch to channel 4? You guys say switch to channel 4 and acknowledge, because I don't know how good your folks are at changing channels in the smoke or in the dark. And we talk about this. Take three guys, gals, say, look, you're all packed up. I'm going to send you into the burn building, 0 visibility. Right? You've heard me do this before, right? Send you there. Now, I'm going to tell you in about 5 minutes to switch from channel 1 to channel 4. How many clicks on the radio? 3, 3, 3. All right, hold your fingers up, 3, 3. Hold your fingers up and say it. All at once, ready, 3. They all laugh. Okay, good. What happens? You send them in there. See, switch to channel 4. One guy goes through muscle back, click, 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 click. He's on channel 5. And now you got to switch to an acknowledge. You can't just say switch and have guys on different channels, because we've seen departments with all, now they got people on different channels. You know, why not just teach your people radio discipline?
Right.
When they hear the
Just
mayday.
adding one more element to what's already going on.
Yes.
So we already got fire operations, we already got search operations, we already got command, we already got roof operations, maybe even water supply. Several different tactics are underway, all in the primary tactical channel. Now we just add RIT. All it is
Are we
another
that
category.
we can't
Hey, think
run
about
our
the
own
emergency. Think about the police. You think about a Marine that's shot on a battlefield during an exchange, during a live fire exercise, right? Do you think all the Marines that are there switch to another channel so that the other Marines that are going to help the Marine that's down aren't bothered by the radio traffic? Absolutely not. Everybody is in the same. We're still all in the same hazard zone. We still all have to deal with the fire and the smoke and the other hazards that are being presented to us inside the fire. In spite of the fact that one of us is in a little bit more trouble than the others, we still should be able to handle that all on one shot.
Well, hey, if you're here, come see us Friday morning for that class. If not, we're both out there together and apart teaching all the time. It's another program we'll be doing in our box full of programs. But we've had a great sponsor again today, 3M Scott Fire and Safety, for sponsoring this show and all the shows from FDIC 2018 this week. It's exciting.
Yep.
It's great seeing people.
Good to be here.
And we're honored that you're able to spend some time with us. So
See you on the show floor.
that's it. Be careful, be safe. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Fire Engineering Talk Radio.